Okay, good evening, everybody. I apologize for starting a little bit late. We were in an executive session. It is Monday, February 10th. This is the Policy Committee meeting for Council Rock School District. My name is Tracy Osecki, and I will start with, I'll start with a board member on the phone, and then we'll start with introductions to my left.
Candace Osecki, Nicole Khan, School Board.
Linda Stone, School Board.
Ed Tate, School Board. Bob Hickey, School Board.
Ron Spring, Council Rock School District.
Andy Sanko, Superintendent.
Michael Roosevelt, School Board.
Joe Hidalgo, School Board.
Ann Horner, School Board.
Dr. Piley, School Board.
Matthew McCarthy, Tech Integration.
Okay, so Ronnie's going to lead the agenda tonight, and then at the end, Ms. Horner has some concerns. We're going to give her as much time as she would like to discuss her concerns, and we can ask questions and have some discussions about that at the end. Okay, it's all yours.
So start off by reading the reminder that we share all meetings. This is a reminder that for reliable, accurate, and up-to-date information about our district, please refer to resources, websites, and social media platforms managed by the Council Rock School District. We urge the community to be judicious in choosing where to obtain information and to be aware that there are unauthorized social media accounts using the Council Rock name that post false and misleading information regarding district matters. If you question what you are seeing, need additional details or a reliable fact check, please contact the district directly. Our contact information is readily available on our website at www.crsd.org. So again, thank you for being here today. We have a few policies that we're going to be looking at. Once again, some have slight modifications to them. Some are just a review of policies that have no changes to them based on amendments or law changes that do or do not exist since the last time that they were reviewed. And then we do have a few policies that we will be bringing back that we have looked at previously, just to look at again. One is just for discussion purposes. The other one is as part of the regular policy agenda. So the first policy to look at is Policy 211, which is student accident insurance. This is one that I made sure I sat down with our business administrator, Mr. Rapp, to make sure that it was accurate and reflective of the insurance that we have and that we provide in district. There are a couple changes. One is just somewhat clarifying. It says in the original, the board shall, and then there's two. The board shall provide, and then there's two commas. So I wanted to make sure we weren't missing anything from when that was posted, and just wanted to clarify to make sure that it reflected what our insurance is today. Mr. Rapp did go through it and provided me with the information. And from a substantive standpoint, it's really just clarifying. We talk about that the secondary accident insurance for a student who may be hurt during an athletic event, co-curricular activity, or anything of that nature. The district does provide secondary accident insurance at no cost to the student or the parent, and it lays out what it's in relation to its injuries resulting from accidents sustained during school-sponsored activities. Again, clubs, activities, co-curricular programs, interscholastic sports, and we provide that. And this just clarifies, again, just a little additional information that compare specifications and suitable coverage, which Mr. Rapp has done a great job doing, and that we assume full cost of the insurance and that all our eligible students are properly insured. So we did remove where it says notify all students and parents who may be eligible to purchase extended 24-hour round-the-clock insurance, because we provide the insurance, so we do not have parents purchase insurance. So that was why that was removed. That may have been something, a vestige from insurance past, but right now we don't require that parents pay for insurance. So that's 211. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to address them. If not, we can continue.
Did you come up with this? Sorry.
Ms. Horner?
When they do their Disney trip and other off-site activities, where does that fall?
It-
Same place.
Yeah, it falls under this because they are school sponsored. Absolutely.
Mr. Hidalgo?
Thank you. I'm sorry. Did you come up with these thoughts after reviewing it?
Yeah, well, in all fairness, Mr. Rapp, who is
Yeah.
has the expertise in this area, is the one who.
I'd just like to know where they come from, so
Yes.
thank you. Appreciate it.
Other questions, Bob?
Yeah, when did the district start providing the insurance? And the other thing I always want to make, to point out though, that it's secondary insurance. So if something were to happen, like your son breaks his finger at football, he's covered by his primary insurance before the district is responsible for anything.
Yes, that is correct. I don't know when, for number 2, when there was, parents were eligible to purchase, I don't know when that started or when that ended. So I don't have that information, but yes, it is secondary. I remember my daughter broke her nose during a lacrosse game and our insurance paid for it, but then the school's secondary insurance assisted after that.
Ms. Stone?
Yeah, I noticed on the back page, you said the adoption date was 2018, so maybe that's when it was offered as purchased. So now that's the new format, is the adoption date last reviewed and last revised.
Yeah, that's how it's set up, yeah.
Okay.
When you go into Board Docs, that's what you will see on the generally. Sometimes you'll have only 2 dates. For instance, if it's a brand new policy or the next 2 policies we're gonna be talking about, you only see 2 dates because there won't be any revision date, because the next 2 policies don't have any revisions.
Yeah,
It's
okay.
just a means of reviewing them. And that would be reporting student progress and promotion and retention. Those are 2 policies previously, also from 2018, in June 2018 when they were adopted. There have been no legal changes to them. There've been no recommended changes to them since that time. We did review them just to make sure that they did still meet our needs the way they are written, and they do. So I submit these for purposes just to review again. So we can indicate that we did review them and that we have an updated date on them when we post them to Board Docs.
Mr. Roosevelt?
Yeah, I'm still on 211.
Oh, I'm
This
sorry.
question pertains to that. How are the students and/or their families notified that this insurance is provided? Would that be at injury, or would that be at the beginning of the event and/or their season, or what? And do we need to indicate that?
I haven't seen any indication. My experience has been that when an incident occurs, that's when parents are notified. So if a student breaks an arm during an athletic event,
Right.
usually parents will come, the student will be with the nurse will advise them, or the athletic trainer will advise them of the availability of secondary insurance.
Do we need to articulate that as far as when students and families are advised that they have this insurance coverage?
We could, my only concern with that is every event's different.
Uh-huh.
So I don't know if there's like a set, maybe, for instance, if they're going to Disney, I don't know, maybe that's presented in the packet saying, child injured, your primary insurance covers it, but then secondary insurance. So I don't know if there's a set, systemic, consistent.
You could say upon injury, because whether it's the broken finger on the football field or somebody twists an ankle at Disney, our nurses and trainers are in contact with the parents.
Oh, you don't have any?
Because I know an insurance carrier or broker would say you can never have too much insurance. But with the example of the Disney trip, sometimes trips offer trip insurance. And so some might want to understand whether they're being double covered, triple covered, or whether to inform that purchase or not, one way or the other. As far as athletic events, that makes a lot of sense. But I'm just wondering if there's some language that we can consider to put in that addresses some of this. I do see it's got a multitude of different event categories, and that makes it a little bit more complicated. But that's my,
Dr. Sanko's point, we can add it right under number 4, not making number 5, but a separate line saying, students, parents/guardians will be notified of secondary insurance no later than upon injury. This way that gives them the opening to know beforehand.
Right.
But
yeah.
they'll definitely know if something happens.
And, Mr. Hickey, you know more.
I would just say that maybe it's already in the student handbook. And if we just make it as part of the general orientation at the beginning of the year, that covers it. Could tie our hand and say, well, we'll notify them, then you have to show proof that you notified them, and I wouldn't get into that language, but I would suspect something like this would or could be in our student handbook for each school. So we can look into it, verify.
So I guess that leaves me kind of wondering where we go on this policy for next month. Mr. Roosevelt, you indicated adding some language about when they'd be notified. Mr. Hidalgo, it sounds like you're not in favor of that. Where are we as far as moving this forward?
my opinion is just let the administration look into it, and if it's addressed, it's addressed, and if it's not addressed, address it, and,
Doesn't need to be part of the policy.
yeah, I mean, let's see what,
So you
What
can
do you
follow up
find?
with us as a board by email, and then we can probably still proceed with it on the February voting. Okay, terrific.
I'd be careful about saying that this, we talk about unforeseen accidents and we'll cover, it's based on whether it's an insurable event. I mean, if a kid cuts his finger at school, we don't want to say that, yeah, we're going to tell them that they have insurance because now they went to the nurse and have a Band-Aid. You know what I'm saying? Why didn't you tell me I have insurance? He cut his finger at school.
Yeah, I can see that.
You know what I'm saying?
Why don't you speak to Mr. Musso about it?
That's
We
why
don't want to be
I-
opening us up to any
Yeah, I wouldn't
liability.
obligate us to say,
this is why I think it
Yeah.
bears some prudence to have either a solicitor and or the administration to just look into this, because we don't want to expose the district to liability one way or the other. We don't have to come up to the answers tonight. I just want to make sure.
I mean, we're telling, we have it, it's there. In the policy manual, and if someone is, I mean, here it is in the policy manual, so it's not that we're keeping it hidden. And parents that have a reportable insurance incident will be asking about insurance coverage. If we say that we're going to notify them and then we don't at the time of injury, then we're liable. That's what I'm saying.
I'm not prescribing any language.
Yeah.
I just think that this is an area where I'm wondering if we need to look into this to see it's addressed one way or the other, not come up with a perfect.
Mr. Hidalgo, did you have your hand up?
I don't know if it's worth saying, it's okay. What was I gonna say? Basically, the policy's here to protect the school district. If someone gets hurt, that we're doing something to cover them. I think the process is pretty standard. The kids get injured all the time, and the nurses know what to do. Administrators know what to do. Whether it's in the book will be fine. To address what you said, it's probably in there. It's definitely in the policy. And so I think we're fine. I think it doesn't need to be a policy language about requiring anything at this point than what's in this. So I think it's good.
Okay, Nikki, do you have anything?
Yes, thanks, Mrs. Hickey. I think this is a pretty straightforward. I hear what everyone's saying. However, I mean, I don't have a high school age student, but I would assume that if there is an injury, administration at the building level, the nurses, teachers all know the protocol. And I am sure if it was a serious injury that requires administration to reach out because, you know, it's a serious injury and this policy would therefore be active, I think. I don't know. Yeah, I don't understand. I think I'm assuming I agree with Mr. Hidalgo that I don't understand the purpose of trying to like put this out for some sort of like letter or informative process when it already exists for families. Thank you.
Ms. Polly?
Well, since we're all talking, I think it makes sense for the administration to check, I'm pretty much following what Mike said, check what is happening, check with our solicitors, and come back with a recommendation so we make a more informed decision next time. I mean, I hear you and I understand, but
Yeah.
let's see what the law firm says.
I mean, I agree, most of the time, a policy is that, procedures is separate. And I think we're talking about procedure.
Anything else on 211? Okay. Mr. Spring, I think we're ready.
Okay, so I guess, just for clarification for me, because I don't want to put anything on the agenda that may not be ready. I'll reach out to the solicitor, find out whether or not this is something we should or shouldn't be doing. Also talk to our cabinet members, particularly our directors of elementary and secondary education, who are both building administrators as well, to find out the process that they engage in. I will share it with the board, and then I will wait, I guess I'll wait to hear whether or not to put it on the agenda for February 20th.
Why don't you, when you share it with the board, ask for an individual response, you know, so you kind of know if we're ready for consent.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, as I had mentioned, 212 and 215 are two of those policies where there have been no modifications, no change. They do meet our needs with respect to student reporting and promotion and retention. They are fairly general policies. Talking about student reporting, for instance, it doesn't provide specific timings other than time in a timely fashion. Providing this leeway also is helpful. You know, there's constant talk about whether they're, you know, right now we're working on our elementary report cards. There's always talk of potential moving from quarters to trimesters. So to have more of a general, all-encompassing policy that our needs fall under with respect to these two are fairly, like I said, fairly routine and fairly general. We're not recommending any changes at this time for those two policies.
Questions? Okay. Speaking of reporting, I guess report cards come out on Wednesday. We can remind the public about that.
So the next policy deals with graduation. What we'll see are particularly two changes to the policies. And you'll see that these are two changes that we've really seen fairly consistently due to some new laws that have passed. One deals with clarifying what the process is for students experiencing educational instability, and the other one deals with children of active duty military families. And again, there's that consistent theme that we've seen in some of our previous policies. As the law has evolved with respect to those two groups, there have been some additions to policies to address the particular specific needs of each of those individual groups. So, and Those are the two. And what you'll see is we also have a more in-depth policy coming up, which is a brand-new policy because of the new laws that deal specifically with children from active duty military families, and that's coming up. So when it refers to policy and stuff like that, we do have a more all-encompassing policy coming up to address that.
Questions about 215? Mr. Hickey?
Mine isn't necessarily a question on the policy. Mine is a question, I'll say board appetite. We decide what the graduation requirements are as a board. And there used to be a requirement that you had to do a graduation project back in the day, and I believe that is no longer the standard. Is that correct? That there's no longer a graduation project, right?
No, but a graduation project could be one of the 5 pathways toward graduation.
My thing, and I've raised this question before, and like I said, I'd like to see if the board has any appetite for it, is I would like to add a graduation requirement to our standards. I think that all of our, especially now because we've added a course recently, we're going to be adding a course next year with family and consumer sciences and all these different things that we do. I think that our students should be able to pass a citizenship test. And I think that we should make that as a part of the graduation requirement. I don't think it would be that time consuming to administer or to take, but at least every student that graduates out here, that out of our school, has the same qualifications as somebody who wants to enter into our country and become a citizen. I mean, we're supposed to be, developing citizens and future leaders and whatnot, and many of our students I know, they don't even know many of the things that are associated with becoming a citizen of the United States and couldn't even answer the same questions. And I think that we should at least have that in there, that they should know some of the basics of how our government and our society runs in order to graduate from our school.
Before we hear from board directors, Dr. Sanko, do you have any insight on that as far as, is it feasible? Like, I thought the requirements were set at the state level, like, is that something we could
The
even,
standards for are you talking about
graduation standards?
graduation? The PDE sets graduation standards and requirements, although the board does have local control. So, for example, I believe our high school graduates need 23 credits out of 24 possible spots to successfully complete those courses in order to demonstrate that they have met the criteria set forth. And the board determines that number of credits.
I'm wondering if this is a conversation we should have tonight, or if we should move it to education. Does everybody have a thought on that?
That's what my comment would be,
Yeah.
that I would think this is an education issue and that this policy should stay in place as now,
Yeah.
as a policy. But I think that's a great idea.
Can we put it on the
but
agenda then
should-
for the next education committee meeting?
Ask Nikki.
Yoda's co-chairing.
But they,
Oh, yes, Yoda.
actually, we already did a pre-meeting for that. And the agenda is pretty full already, so,
Okay.
but we can always take it with the administration and see.
Well, I mean, I can always bring it up at the education committee at the end of the meeting, so either way, we'll discuss it.
Good idea.
All right.
Good idea.
Mr. Hidalgo?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of like the idea. There's many ways to facilitate that education to people, not necessarily have to tie it to graduation. I would like to talk to people about it, see if other schools are doing it. I mean, it's a noble idea, because again, you do see people in college that you thought, wow, you don't know what this word means or that word. And I think when it comes to civics, sometimes people are missing it too. And I'll say, it's not any school in particular or anything like that, just across the board, how education has gone, so. But civics is very important. And so I'd like to know, maybe it's something to talk about. I don't know if it has to be tied in this time with this policy, but for a future suggestion, maybe we could even see where everybody lies now. Maybe go ahead and have we'll test all the students now and their civil knowledge. Citizenship knowledge, but anyway, I don't see where we can tie it into it now.
Ms. Polly?
Yeah, well, I had to take that test to become a US citizen. And I have to say, I would be very surprised if someone finishes high school and they do not know that information. Now, not that they're not going to forget down the road, because a lot of it's history and things that we learned, but I mean, it's part, if you are having a like robust curriculum, they should definitely know and have all these things covered. So I don't know, you can maybe go to the state or get whatever the test and compare it really. I would be very surprised.
I'd love to see a social studies teacher do it.
If our students don't know that stuff, yeah.
Mr. Roosevelt?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting idea to further discuss, and the education committee meeting is a good point. I respect your comments, it's wonderful. But I'm also aware over the past, I don't know, I'll be generous, maybe 20 years, there's several videos or shows where they feature this, and it's quite embarrassing to find them do like Man on the Street, college campus, and these people have no idea. It's really, really embarrassing. So, yeah, I think it's an interesting conversation to entertain.
Mr. Hidalgo?
I mean, when we're done speaking about this particular thing, I wanted to go on to another point of the policy.
215? 215?
217, sorry.
We haven't moved, oh yeah, we are on 217. Okay.
When somebody, just make sure we're past this.
Okay, and Ms. Horner, did you have something on this?
No.
All right, so I think we're ready to, finish up with that policy,
Okay.
so go ahead.
So, to the administration, talk about the student experience and educational instability, and we're putting a shall in there, we'll follow these steps. What happens if we fail that? I mean, and aren't we already doing that? So I'm just wondering where that language came from.
So I think we probably are doing it already. I think our guidance counselors are, but I do believe that under the way that the law it has evolved, that students who do have who are experiencing educational instability, I think we've been ahead of the curve, but I think you are required to sit down with that student and come up with a graduation plan to address the specific needs of that student. I would say though, I think we've been ahead of the curve here, and I think we've been doing that.
Do you document it through IEPs or anything like that, or how are you gonna do it? Because you're saying you shall, and the parent says you didn't.
I would have to look into it based on my experience. I think through the guidance, when guidance counselors meet with students and they know of specific needs of students, whether it be, a student of an active military person, parent, student who experiencing educational instability, the guidance counselor or school counselor sits down with that student and creates a plan going forward to meet that student's needs. And they're usually, I believe, recorded in that student's file to help that student progress. I will defer to, but that's been my experience.
Also involved in that process, when there is a student with an instability like that, the social workers are highly involved in that. That does not apply necessarily to students, just students who have IEPs. That could apply to anyone. And then we are required to do our best to make sure kids leave here successfully graduating, and the state has set forth pathways for graduation. So for a student that may have experienced difficulty, whether they have educational instability or not, they can't pass a Keystone test, there are other avenues that will allow them to get to graduation. So we actually track that. We track that every year.
Okay, and then is it an option to hold back a student for a year? Sometimes that's a positive. I tend to believe, from my experience, that, I don't know if it's just my experience, but there tends to be a push, should I say, to get the kids through and not hold back. And I don't know if that's always the best.
We do have a retention policy. Retention is not done lightly. The school team, as well as the parents, are involved anytime that there is a retention request, either by the parent or by the school.
Okay. And during the pandemic, just to note, they were allowing everybody to pretend retention was allowed for a year.
There was.
Across the board.
At 64, if my
Okay.
memory serves me correctly.
Right. That doesn't happen again. Thanks. I guess I'm good.
Anybody else?
So the next policy does have some substantive changes over time. The policy has evolved. It was adopted in 2018 as well. So there's a few modifications to this policy that I would like to discuss with everyone. One deals with aligning it with the evolution of our behavioral threat assessment teams. That if there is a concern, there is a threat to safety of students or other students, employees, for a student who is involved in dating violence, no different than any other type of violence or anything like that. If they meet the criteria, that they will be reported to the behavioral threat assessment team that's overseen by Mr. Mihalik, our supervisor of security and safety. So that is the first part. The second part, again, another evolution, really is, again, something that we've done in the past. If we do get a case where we believe there has been dating violence, sometimes that can also fall under discrimination as well. Basically, the policy says it's not one or the other. You can run parallel investigations. If you feel that not only is there dating violence, but it also falls under the discrimination policy of the district, which we have, then you can run and you should run parallel investigations with those two events. You shouldn't pick one and then not do the other. The next part of it deals with a much discussed policy that we've had, which is the discipline of students convicted or adjudicated of sexual assault. This falls under, if the dating violence also falls under and leads to the fact that a student is convicted of or adjudicated of sexual assault, this policy refers us to the new policy that we previously passed, which is the new policy that deals with students who have been adjudicated of sexual assault. And then we take those steps, whether it's moving the student out of district and protecting the victim and so on and so forth. So that's just the connection of those two, that new policy with this policy here. And the third part really just lays out that if there is a finding of dating violence, that the principal should and must recommend the appropriate disciplinary action as set forth in the code of conduct, and where appropriate, needs to report the incident to law enforcement.
Mr. Hidalgo?
I was just thinking about this one, so, because I know like bullying online, sometimes we don't get involved with that, or maybe I'm misunderstood. But with this, if it's two students of our school district, then we have kind of like, say, jurisdiction on complaints regarding this kind of activity, which I take seriously, and I'm all for getting involved as we can. So is that my understanding? What if it's dating between a complaint against someone who's not a student, but it's our student?
So
That's two questions, I guess.
Well, I think that the first thing is we rely heavily on law enforcement anytime we think that there is a criminal act or any kind of criminal conduct. You know, we have the anonymous reporting system that's statewide, the Safe to Say. And we run all of those Safe to Say reports to ground. Many times, more often than not, police are involved because not every report that is submitted, whether it's through Safe to Say or through the CARES office or to an adult, doesn't happen on school time, doesn't happen on school property. So we do what we're obligated to do as mandatory reporters, and we involve law enforcement immediately. And so in a case like this, if we got that, we would hear what the complaint was. We would take the necessary school actions, which include being a mandatory reporter. We would report to Childline, and we would alert the law enforcement. At the same time, and as long as law enforcement, we weren't obstructing what they were doing, if it was criminal, we would do our own internal investigation.
Okay, but this policy is for 2 students of our school district only. I mean, we have the other avenues, but you wouldn't apply this to a non-student offender.
If one student of our school district said this, we would apply it
Oh,
as much as we could.
okay, yeah, I mean,
Because
obviously,
we-
okay. Not everything will apply.
Correct, yes.
Okay, I got you.
I just want clarification back to make sure we have the correct wording of everything. Because if the investigation results in a substantiated finding of dating violence, the building principal shall recommend appropriate disciplinary action as circumstances warrant in accordance with the Code of Student Conduct and report incident to law enforcement. And you just said Childline, then you would do that to Childline or no?
So notifying Childline automatically notifies law enforcement.
Okay.
As soon as we submit a Childline for any kind of criminal act, they
Yeah.
notify.
Okay.
So we as a school district are a reporting agency, law enforcement and Childline, they're the investigatory agency.
Mhm. Okay, thank you. Clarify.
Sure.
Mr. Roosevelt?
Yeah, this is, I appreciate what you said, Dr. Sanko, that you sort of helped me with a lot of this. I don't want to say concern, that's probably too strong of a word, but this is an important element, which I recognize. But I'm left here thinking violence is violence, whether you're dating or whether you're not dating, right? And I also am cautious about this school district being used as a investigatory or policing for criminal complaints. And some of this violence could rise to criminality. So I'm interested to hear a little bit more on what separates, why do we need to cubbyhole all of these things as opposed to just say violence and violence. The next, and dovetail in with that, is this element of on-campus, student-sponsored or class, school-sponsored events versus at home, right? I'm trying to think at some point, we do want to, well, at all points, we want to provide a safe environment for students, and we want to be aware and cognizant of the complexities of their relationships. But at some point also, how far should the school go into individuals' lives? So I'm interested in, I guess, the specificity of how do we separate this and say it's dating violence versus violence. Violence can be criminal. We're not getting into it. Where do we draw these lines and why are we drawing these lines?
So let me start with your question on campus versus not on campus. If something happens off campus and a parent calls us or an adult or another child says, this happened at the 7-Eleven, this happened at the park, it does not fall under the umbrella of the district in terms of it didn't happen on school property, it didn't happen with a school device, it didn't happen during the school day, it didn't happen on the Florida trip. That does not negate our responsibility and obligation to call law enforcement. When it happens on school property, we are obligated, in some cases, to do a Title IX investigation because somebody could make a claim that it's a harassment or bullying or But in those cases, when we turn it over to law enforcement, they will say to us, this is something that could rise to the level of criminality, or they will say to us, this is something that should be handled at the school district level. So our default is, when in doubt, make the call. We want to be overcautious for every one of our students, whether it happened on campus or off campus, that we're doing our due diligence, whether it's calling the child line, talking to the parents, or talking with the police department. And unfortunately, we've had some cases that we've spent a lot of time investigating that we have not come to any conclusion on, and that has been consistent, turning it over to law enforcement as well as the DA's office when there have been no findings. But I think we owe it to our kids and our community that we turn over every stone possible when there is an allegation of some kind of violence.
So you need this policy to make it clear that you can make the call. Is that what I'm hearing? The child line call?
No, we don't need that policy to make a child.
Correct.
Neither do you as an adult. You're mandated to,
Right, exactly. And that's kind of what I'm wrapping my head around with this policy, as far as whether it's Andy and Mike are good friends and we go down to the 7-Eleven after we get off the school bus on our way home and something happens, violence occurs between the two of them, argument over a candy bar, who knows, whatever, right? And parent A or parent B makes a phone call and says this happens, violence occurred. It doesn't matter whether Andy and Mike are dating or not, it's violence, right? And part of that child reporting. On the other hand, I mean, you might have, so that's just what I'm trying to understand as far as why the need for the specificity.
So I think when it's more of a philosophical maybe view. This isn't a mandated policy under PSA, so I don't know why. I can't get into the head of why it was approved. I could probably guess, but I think the way sometimes people look at dating violence different than, or abuse of that area different than just regular violence, or maybe push it aside and maybe they wanted to make sure it stood out. I don't know. I can't get it. I don't know what was in their head in 2018 when it was first adopted.
Yeah.
So my only guess could be it was for philosophical purposes, because again, this isn't a mandated policy, but it's a policy that I guess the board in 2018 felt was one that they wanted at the time.
Yeah, so like would the students that are dating that are having a breakup, would they be potentially entitled to a greater level of protection or understanding in the school? Is that what we're getting at here?
No, I think what Ronnie is saying is that it was the desire of the board in 2018 to have a policy on dating violence, to pull that out and put it in a silo as compared to your example, violence is violence.
Yeah.
Because it is not mandated. I don't know if something may have happened in 2018 or before that, but it wasn't of import enough that the board and administration at that time felt that the policy was needed. And all we're looking at is this policy that is in existence in Council Rock with the law, and saying, here's how we would bolster this in today's world based on what 2018 presented.
Got it. Thank you. I just wanted to hear a little bit more about
Absolutely.
the rationale.
I know Ms. Stone has a question, but Mr. Tate, is it related to what Mr. Roosevelt's? Go ahead.
Yeah, so I just quickly use the internet. It's amazing. And I typed in 1553 Pennsylvania, and I find that there was a directive from presumably the legislature to the Pennsylvania Department of Education saying that the department, through its Office for Safe Schools, in consultation with the State Board of Education, shall develop within 6 months a model dating violence policy to assist school district in developing policies for dating violence reporting and response. And it goes on, but my point is that I think there was an initiative that came out of the state legislature to specifically address dating violence. And that encouraged school districts to develop a specific policy on dating violence. So I think that gives us a little clue as to the history, because it is a good question. It's like, where did this come from? Well, sounds like there was a statewide initiative.
Thanks, Mr.
Thank you.
It's helpful, Mr. Kate. Ms. Stone?
I was just gonna say that I don't think it's a bad thing to highlight this area when it's something brand new for kids. This is when they're starting to date, and parents are thinking about this too. And I think separating it is not a bad thing. So.
Mr. Hidalgo?
I'll just add to what Mr. Taylor, it's funny, we were both doing the same thing at the same time. So the Safe School Act of 1995 laid some groundwork for safety in schools, but in 2010, Pennsylvania passed House Bill 101, amending the public school code to include provisions for dating violence. And then the Pennsylvania Department of Education, through the Office of Safe Schools, developed a modeling policy that we're kind of looking at, dating violence policy that we're looking at tonight.
Thank you.
Other comments on this policy? Okay, I have two. First, whether or not this needs to be a separate policy, you know, I have no feedback on, but it is a good reminder for those of us sitting at this table, you know, that this kind of stuff does happen in our schools, and I'm glad we have a policy on it, and I'm glad that we have an administration that's so committed to it. So I know we take this very seriously. So thank you for that, Dr. Sanko and your team. And then the second comment is for Mr. Spring, because I also see here that we have linked, and you discussed how you linked the policy that we had done previously about students, discipline of student convicted or adjudicated of sexual assault. I know when we have done some of these policies, there has been feedback from the board about, you know, should we do these policies kind of as a group versus doing one and then another, because we might forget to link it. But here it is, you've linked it, and I appreciate that you've been diligent on that, and it's really helpful. So thank you for that. Next.
So that's a great segue, because we're talking about linking policies. So as we had earlier today and past several months, we've had a lot of additions to the policies dealing with educational opportunity for children active military. And it affected our enrollment policies, it affected our graduation policies, it affected several other policies that we dealt with previous. And this is really the overarching policy that all those additional provisions fall under. So it explains, you know, it defines what are we talking about. We're talking about active military. What are we talking about when we talk about children in military families? What doesn't it include? Who doesn't fall under it? Has several definitions, but then it talks about, you know, what as a board and as a district we need to do. And if you look at that, you'll see a lot of the areas where we've added that provision in the past few months that with respect to the needs of active military, children of active military. So this is kind of like that overarching policy that directed us to link those paragraphs that we had throughout the past several months and that we have even today in graduation policies to meet the needs of our active military students.
And this is a new policy,
Correct.
and basically, is it a boilerplate from PS?
Correct. Yep, and we've addressed, as we've been moving through, we've addressed a lot of the requirements already. This is kind of like explaining, kind of puts the bow on it, so to speak. And again, it's really to provide flexibility for the children of our active military, because they do move around. They do have, different states or different jurisdictions have different graduation requirements and stuff like that. So it's really to you them and facilitate their entry into and success in our school district.
So when you put in dates of adoption, you'll still include this PSBA revision?
So this will only have one date, because this is
Okay.
brand new,
Right.
so it will say adoption date, and then the date of the board, the second reading board meeting.
Okay.
Because there's no revision and there's no,
But are you leaving in this footnote that it's a PSBA?
no,
Report?
that's just our notes. This is when the law came out so recently, that's why all these things are being added now. That's just the date for our reference. Our adoption date will be the date that we'll use.
Okay.
I apologize. Other questions? Mr. Roosevelt?
Just a couple of quick ones.
Sure.
And I'm glad that you referenced that, because we do see a lot of this element that gets put in a lot of different policies. Is that, clearly this is a result of a recent law change that Harrisburg enacted about these two classifications of individuals. My question really is pertaining to, on the second one, I was just curious, it has nothing to do specifically with this policy, but facilitating the timely enrollment of children, then it goes on to say of military families. Do you have a rough idea on how long it takes this district to enroll someone?
I don't, it's fairly quick, but one of the things that, in particular, when they talk about the timeliness, is a lot of times families of active military will get orders,
Yeah.
and they have to move, and they don't have the ability to have a residence, they don't have any of that. So what this permits is the timeliness permits the enrollment of students of active military families even before there's proof of residence
Yeah.
or anything like that. Let's get them in, let's get them started right away, because it takes time. Like, if orders come in and they're deployed to
Sure.
here, it's gonna take time for them to, dot the i's, cross the t's from the residency standpoint.
Right.
So this removes that barrier. It basically says,
Right.
let's get them in,
Yeah.
and then let's follow up and get the needed documentation afterwards.
Yeah, so it totally makes sense to me, but do we have a rough idea, maybe Dr. Senko, have an idea of how long it takes this district to enroll a student, regardless of their status?
From the time all of the enrollment requirements are completed, within 3 days.
Okay, yeah. And then, as we've discussed, some.
Let me just put a caveat on that.
Yeah.
If we have somebody enrolling right now for full-day kindergarten for next year, it's not going to be 3 days. Like, if it's mid-year and somebody moves into the district,
Yeah,
by the time we get them enrolled, we do the pre-test, placement test for them, we create a schedule for them, it takes us about 3 days.
that's great, thank you.
Anybody else? Well, I think this is terrific. We need to do everything we can to have our military kids not have any delays or any problems transferring. So I forgot to ask Nikki. Nikki, sorry, anything from you for the last couple of policies?
No, thank you, I'm good, thank you.
I apologize.
So the next policy, 203, is a policy that we are revisiting. It was on the board, and then we pulled it because we needed to, the board felt they wanted to discuss it further and address some questions that came up. So we wanted to bring it forward again today to have that discussion and to see how we'd like to move forward on it.
Mr. Hidalgo?
Yeah, thanks. This is the one I brought, caught at the meeting. I apologize, and I thank everybody for pausing and giving us the opportunity to look at this. These types of things are near and dear to me personally. So I'm glad we're picking it up on again. Is this something that we're looking to get on the next meeting, or is this not one of the four? This is.
I think it is.
Okay.
right? Is that correct, Ronnie? This.
So,
I'll defer to.
well, I'll just say this, in the current form, I definitely don't want a consent agenda this, I'm gonna bring it back up for public, but I'll ask, the administration to do me a favor, and, I think the administration I would ask is to contact our local, health office and kind of get their idea, I mean, of where they stand on the policy like this, because if we, I'm talking about the authority now, the guidance order from state and local officials, that was added, for state and local health officials. That wasn't in that was added, but what really, I think there was a solution you guys tried to make, and it said, which went complete opposite of what I was saying, in blue, under the authority, which unfortunately, the public can't follow. It says, in the event of a conflict among regulatory requirements, the regulations of the higher level of government would be followed. There's a few things that stand out to me there. But the one thing is, I think the highest level of government, and this is going to be soapboxish and kind of a joke, but not really, it's the real deal, is highest level of government is we the people. So if that's the kind of representative democracy we have here, then a republic, should I say, representative republic, then the closest agency to we the people would be the local health officials. And I lived through this, I think the country lived through this when things got pretty hairy with the last health pandemic, or should I say government shutdowns. And there was a lot of regulations pushed back and forth, there was a lot of pain. I remember that dearly. And so for this to come out here and to say, we're gonna, hamstring future boards to make decisions based on what we think is ridiculous. It shouldn't be in our policy. I think we shouldn't be taking these types of stances. When we went through this, and some of us went through this on the board together, you're gonna have the people, like in the last situation, that demonize you, and others that think you're great. So you're never gonna have I could be opposite depending on whatever information I'm hearing from that local person. So I will completely change what I think based on what I believe is right. So I don't think that we should sit here, and the same thing, you might vote for this thinking you're doing a great job and then be like, it's not what I voted for, so I think, can I just keep talking without, please? So I would say that we shouldn't touch upon that. I think the policy's fine just the way that it is. But if we are gonna do this, I would like to hear from our current local health official, Dr. Damsker. I would like to hear what he thinks, because if you say you're gonna follow a higher level, you basically should just write that him or his office is now obsolete when it comes to managing our local things in certain situations. And plus, he's the guy who, if there is an outbreak, he's the guy we're going to. So you need to speak, you need to adhere to that, or at least consider it. I'm not saying that whoever's in that office is always going to be right, but we should not be tying one hand behind somebody's back that we don't even know who's going to be on the board at the time that, God forbid, this comes up. So I'll leave it at that. And then I'm just going to say one more thing, because we can go back to this. I'll be voting no if that language is in the front. And then also, and it'll be a separate discussion, but I do want to look at this whole thing. I'll leave it there, because I just want everybody to be able to speak about this before I go jumping around. And I think it was Ms. Stone wanted to say
I
something.
have Ms. Stone, Mr. Tate, Mr. Hickey, Ms. Horner, in that order, please.
I guess I'm a little confused, because my understanding is that the State Department of Health tells all public schools in the state of PA what immunizations are required to enter into, to have your child in the school. Are you suggesting that we don't immunize our children?
No.
All right, are you suggesting that we don't follow the State Department of Health rules?
No.
But that's all we're saying here.
No. Do you remember what happened in the last in the last pandemic where there was conflicts. And I'm going to say this, it says community, so that in order to safeguard the school community from spread of communicable diseases, the board shall require guidance and orders from the state and local health officials to establish board policies and administer regulations. What we had during the last pandemic is conflicts between state and local agencies. And so this is, what this is saying is, when there's a conflict between state and local agencies, we are going to go to the higher government, which
is the
doesn't,
state.
but it could be the WHO.
But that's the law. The State Department of Health regulates immunizations in the state of PA.
This is why we're going to talk, I asked us to talk to Dr. Dansker, because you'll understand, he'll be able to explain it to you, I believe, if there's an issue. Because I think he'll have an issue with this.
What is it that you're looking for? Do you want to say?
Leave the language out, just leave the language out. It's not in there now, why does it have to be in there? That we're going to say, we're going to follow higher authority, where I'm not advocating my authority as a school board to go with the state when I might agree with the local person. It's up to us to do what we need to do at each school board, because that's the law. It
So
says,
you're saying the only thing you want to say is, you don't want to say in the event of a conflict, the regulations of the higher government would be followed.
I would just say the board, leave it as the language is now, which is the board recognizes the challenge. Well, no, you can, yeah, right. So they did change more than what's in here. What I'm just saying is, you got the gist of what I'm saying. I don't have the exact language, but I don't think we should hand tie us into following one agency or another. I don't think that was part of the original purpose of this. Go ahead.
No, and I just want to clarify, so this language wasn't created by administration, this was, we reached out to the solicitor who provided this language, and it was asked, what happens, what language would we put in if there's a conflict among, as you said, Mr. Valdez?
I don't agree.
So, I just wanted to say, so this did
So
come from
what's in
Mr.
blue
Russo.
is from
Mr. Russo.
Yeah.
So you can say guidance from the state and the local, that's not the problem, so you could get rid of the blue. True. But as I said, I think we would all be wise to listen to what the local government agency may want to offer or not. Maybe he'll say, I'm not getting involved, but that's what I ask.
The original policy just said that the board requires that guidance from the state and local officials establish board policy. That was the original one. You're the one that came up with an option 2.
My option 2 is not here, thank you.
But you're the one that came up with an option 2 which is why that last sentence was added.
or Joe's option too.
No, my
Those
option 2 is
options said we'll
not.
consider the state and local
Yeah.
government.
This is going back to like November or something,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Sure.
So you're
it was
saying-
the board, I
so-
think what Joe asked to be added, the board will consider the guidance and orders from state and local health officials. I do not know what the wording was before that, like, I don't have a completely, what the current policy is.
Yeah, I didn't see that, Mr.
Yeah, it just said
Mr.
option 1. It just says, but the board requires the guidance and orders from state and local health officials. And it
I
did
think-
not, it did not deal with the
I
conflict.
think it said shall, and I'm like, dude, just make it,
Oh.
we'll consider, because we're not advocating.
You're right, and then I had a problem with that, I said, I'm not comfortable with.
And then this guy just
Like,
basically,
Yeah, down the road, you're right.
basically put it back in there. So that's fine. I think, again, let's talk to Dr. Damsker, and if you wanna, I would like to get his, he's a public official, and I think that, he has, that I would ask him, and he has the right to do, either offer his opinion or not.
Mr. Tate?
Yeah, I recall quite clearly the situation we encountered with COVID, and it was a conflict between guidance that we were getting at the national level and the state level and the local level. And there was a lot of conflict and ambiguity. So if we don't have this clause in the blue, the sentence that was added, then policy really isn't very helpful, because it says, we'll look at state policy, we'll look at local policy, and we've done nothing to clarify the situation. And as far as tying the hands of future boards, I mean, if we didn't want to do that, we wouldn't have any policies whatsoever. We have to make decisions now based on what we think is important. And our solicitor educated me on talking about we, the people, in the US Constitution, it's the supremacy clause. Basically it says that federal laws are more important than state laws. And the parallel to that is that state laws are more powerful than local legislation. So, I mean, we could have a policy that doesn't have a sentence that resolves the question of if, in the event of a conflict, regulations of a higher level of government would be followed. But if we don't have that, then the policy really isn't very helpful.
We already have the policy. The policy already exists.
I'm aware of that.
I'm sorry for interrupting you.
Yeah, no, that's all right. I'm just saying that I think this is an attempt to clarify what we do in the future in the event of a conflict. And without a sentence like that, I just don't think this policy works.
So all I ask then is before we go ahead and do this, we ask our local agency for their input. That's what I'm requesting. And I'm asking this to not be on the agenda next week and give us some time to look at it. It can wait. I mean, right now, I'll tell you this. You can't even talk to the National Health. They're not allowed to speak right now. There's no guidance. We just got out of the WHO. I mean, things are changing. So, and the local government is basically, they're talking about getting rid of, downsizing federal authority and giving everything back to the states.
Yes.
So then we have the states, and then even the states, they trickle everything down to, if we did, to counter what you're saying, why would we have a local Department of Health if it had the authority? So, and not every county or municipality, whatever, has an agency like we did. And from my opinion, having that local authority during the pandemic was like the only shining light that said maybe 3 feet would be better than 6 feet. We can all argue now to say, and me and Mr. Senko, at the time it was Mr. Senko, walked measuring the desks, and it was if it was 3 feet, we all could have just gotten back into school, but we didn't go back into school because there was a 6 foot thing, and it was arbitrary. So this is what I'm saying. Don't get tied up with, make your own decisions when the time comes. That's what I say to future boards, even if I don't agree with you.
I have Mr. Hickey and then Ms. Stone, Mr. Roosevelt, Ms. Horner. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Horner was next after Mr. Okay, Mr. Hickey, Ms. Horner, Ms. Stone, Mr. Roosevelt.
Yeah, I mean, we've been through this before, and like I said, I agree with Mr. Hidalgo as it relates to COVID and who was right and who was wrong, whether it be the local or the state. And Joe mentioned a few times, why don't we talk to Dr. Dansker? And like you said, if they don't have any influence at all, what's the point of having them at all? Why would we just say the board requires guidance and orders from local officials and leave the state out of it? Because as Joe said, the local official may turn around and say, hey, I'm gonna do what the state says. Like, the state says this, and that's my advice to you, is follow state guidance, or this is what the federal government says. But when there's an issue, the people that know more about the issue is the local. I think we should try to get away from the federal and the state level as much as possible. I mean, school districts are supposed to be based locally. And I would just remove everything and just say the board requires that guidance. I don't even necessarily leave the orders in. I would take guidance from the local health officials. Because if Dr. Dansker says, hey, I think we should do what the state says, well, then we'll do what the state says. And that way he has some influence.
But I don't think that, if you don't agree with Dr. Dansker, then now you just got yourself opposite. So what I'm trying to say is, leave it out.
I don't agree with, like,
If there's
you
a
say me as a
conflict,
board member, don't agree with it.
Yeah, because really, I'm gonna wanna vote my conscience when it comes to these things. So, just, as I said, I think once you hear from Dr. Dansker, it will be very clear on how he sees the law. Because he knows what happens. When there's an outbreak, he's the first one there. There's authority he has that I don't think we understand, that we don't know until you ask him about this, and he might say, this is good. But what I'm trying to say is, I don't think that we should be saying, we'll follow this or we'll follow that. The language, if I had it in front of me, what's the current language say?
The current language is, in order to safeguard the school community from the spread of certain communicable diseases, the board requires that established board policy and administrative regulations be followed by students, parents, and the district staff. So
Okay,
the red and the blue is not included.
no,
in
I
the
see,
policy.
and there's no mention of this whole thing about state and local authority, whether it even needs to be in there. We're gonna make the decisions, they're gonna make the decisions based on the time frame. And anything that says that we have to follow local or we have to follow, higher, the board's gonna make that decision, a majority will make that decision and deliberate at the time. And we should, as I said, we shouldn't be making decisions for future board. Because I might not agree with Dr. Damsker on certain things, right? So I'm gonna have my own vote. And I'm just a parent, I'm not an expert. But everybody seemed to be an expert when it comes to this stuff.
Ms. Horner?
Thank you. My concern is what happened during COVID, Dr. Damster got shut down, and he didn't get shut down by medical people. So I want to make sure that we have in here that the higher level, even if we do, because I'd like this, I understand because there's going to be conflict from our state and local. If there is on that, it just says higher level of government. I want to make sure it's health. This is immunization. These are diseases. I want to make sure it's health and specified in here. Because we just say high level of government, that could be somebody from the state that is not in the health. And then what do we do? And that's what happened in COVID. I don't want that to happen again. I want to make sure that we're following the health people that are the professionals.
Ms. Stone?
I agree, we want to follow the health department, and it's very easy to put in guidance from the state health department and local health department, and then you're done. And I understand Joe's need to make a decision, but I would think parents of this community trust the decisions of the state health department over Joe Hidalgo's feelings of what his personal convictions are.
It's not.
I don't think parents want, I think
That's
parents want the state health department to make the best decisions for the community and their children, not you or me. As you said, we're not professionals. The state health department is. Who do you want? Do you want me to make a decision on your health? You want me,
can't.
layman, to make a decision for your child?
Can't.
No, well, no parents want me or you to make a decision. That's why we have a health department.
I don't make decisions for these.
Well,
This is
as
making-
Ann said-
This is developing policies.
Yeah,
So when you're developing policies, I'm only dividing a policy. The parents are gonna make their own decisions on whether follow policy or not. And I won't follow a
That's
policy
right.
that I don't agree with.
that's right. So
Okay.
I think Ann's point is good, that we that we take guidance from the state health department.
That's not
There
what
you go.
I'm saying.
No, that's, I want specifically, that I would like, I shouldn't say I want, it specifically is, we can't be shut down again and have our local health director shut down and have non-medical people make the decision.
No, but she's saying that you're gonna, you're
Shut down.
You're saying that.
Because they're saying it'll be the state health department
Wait,
that
so
will
we can have this,
supersede.
I'm okay with the state and health, I'm okay with this. I'm okay with the state and health, as long as we have.
Over Dr.
such a-
Damsker.
If he's part of it,
He's got to follow what the state tells him. That's the whole idea of the law.
Well, if you realize it, I think that we need to just talk to Dr. Damsker. I would ask that he would, maybe he would even come in on it, because it's not about making those decisions, it's about establishing the board policies, okay? So in a crisis, you have to come up with policies. And if you remember last time, every school district had to come up with their own, there was no policy. Everybody had to come up with their own health and safety plan. And that's where we got into trouble.
Mr. Roosevelt, you've been waiting, sorry.
Thank
No,
you.
it's
I'm
actually
sorry.
okay. I actually didn't raise to be heard, but at this point in the conversation, I'm happy to inject a few things. I do have a couple of problems. The supremacy clause, as Mr. Tate read it, as I've read it, as it's been communicated to us, pertains to laws, where this policy is clearly pertaining to guidance. So the supremacy clause, I think, is an interesting angle to include into this, but it doesn't fit perfectly. I also think that the higher level of governance is vague and perhaps misinterpretive. So one person may say the higher level of government is the state, another person might say it's the Fed, another person might say it's the world, and somebody else in America might say it's the people, right? And to some degree, they're all right. I think that, just to wind back, because I was sitting here remembering all of our conversations, the original problem with this, where the board injected a thought to change this, was because we were trying to avoid conflict, not create conflict. And I think to some degree it's helpful to use an example such as COVID, such as these other elements that we've talked about. But at the other point, I think it's counterproductive because it brings in a lot of emotions and other things, and it starts to divide us on political lines. And a policy isn't supposed to do that either. So I think that I do recall there was an issue between shall and may in one of the approaches, and I understand how that could be problematic. So the intent was to not cause a conflict as opposed to bring us into conflict or to tie us to one particular issue or another. I have a problem with the way this language is right here. I agree with a lot of comments that I've heard around the table, particularly Ms. Horner is talking about, and I think this dovetails in with Ms. Pally's comment back earlier in the conversation when we looked at this, of saying, we want to look at and hear what a doctor has to say. We don't want to make the decisions for ourselves, and we don't want to connect to, we don't want to adhere or be subservient to a politician, regardless of what level in the chain they are. We want to listen to doctor and medical advice. We want to be provided with guidance. So, you know, we're trying to remove the conflict, not create conflict, and we also don't want to abdicate our responsibilities to the children in this district as well. So I think we're all trying to go in the right way, but we're getting hung up on a couple of things. So I just thought maybe some of that rehashing of how we came to this problem and how some people are aligned on some areas of this. But I have a problem with the way this is currently written as well. I think it actually creates more of a problem when we first looked at it. So.
Okay. Ms. Polly's next. Before I go to Ms. Polly, I do want to just read here, the Supreme Court, this is an email that we got from Mr. Amuso. Municipalities are the creatures of the state and have no inherent powers of their own. Rather, they possess only such powers of government as are expressly granted to them and as are necessary to carry the same into effect. The preemption doctrine establishes a priority between potentially conflicting laws enacted by various levels of government. Under this doctrine, local legislation cannot permit what a state statute or regulation forbids or prohibit what state enactment allow. So and it says additionally, a local ordinance may not stand as an obstacle to the execution of the full purposes and objectives of the legislature. So I only bring that up in response to your first point. In regards to your second point, I completely agree. It is the purpose of this policy is to eliminate, or as I see it, and I was the one who first said, like, I'm not okay with the word consider. I view our job as board members to set policies that are clear so that students and families know what they can expect, and to put a future board in a position where everybody knows and is aligned and there isn't a conflict. So that was my thinking on that.
I just want to respond to that. Once again, the words in there were laws and legislative and ordinance. We're not doing any of that. we're talking about guidance and policy, which is different from laws. We're not legislating anything. In fact, some of the problems in the past weren't laws also. So it was conflicting of guidance. So nothing in my thought process or my recommendation is for us to violate a law. But I don't find the supremacy clause specific and accurate because we're not talking about laws. We're talking about guidance, we're talking about policies. We're not talking about legislating laws or even passing ordinances. I agree, an ordinance shouldn't and can't counteract or get as an obstacle in the way of a state law. And I agree that we as a board don't have the ability to get in the way of an ordinance or a law. But we're talking about guidance and policy. So I think that's an important distinction.
Ms. Pelly?
Yeah, I like Dr. Dumpster. I've met him and I was very impressed. And I would never want to do something to disrespect him because he is our, guru in the local area. But at the same time, I think he does have to follow the state policy. He is not an island himself. And Mike, you're right. I have said last time, I'm not a health expert. I want to follow the advice of people who know exactly what they're doing. And that's what I think we're trying to figure out, because the people that will decide what kind of immunizations my children will take, I want them to be health experts. So it makes sense to follow our local and our state health official advice. I don't see really, I don't understand why I don't think we really disagree in essence, because we're all saying the same thing. We just have to find the right language to say it. At the same time, I know that, people on the board come and go. I know who's going to be on the board at that time. And of course, I can change the policy if they have majority. But this board is not a health board. So we have to figure out a way to follow the advice of people who know exactly, how to make health decisions. So, I don't know how to change the language. I think Peter Amuso tried to help us. Maybe we need to change the blue language in a way that we're all going to agree. But we have to follow the law and the health experts. We cannot create our own.
All right, okay. Mr. Hickey?
Yeah, I agree completely, and to your point, not only do school boards come and go, Dr. Dansker comes and goes,
That's right.
and people
Correct,
like him.
Yeah.
So that was the point that I was trying to make, is just and I totally agree, I won't agree to anything that doesn't have health official listed in here as opposed to official, just to make that distinction. The point I was just trying to make is, it's just a philosophy that I have in education in general, that education should be it should work from the local level out as opposed to from the upper level in. And I agree, I don't think Dr. Dansker would his recommendation is probably not going to be contrary to what the state says, or to what maybe even the federal government says. I don't think he's going to go contrary to it. That's the reason I said we should go local, because since we do have a Bucks County Department of Health, who is a doctor, and people who know a lot more than probably most of us at this table, rely on him, because his recommendation is most likely going to be the recommendation of the state, and their recommendation is most likely going to be theirs of the local government. But when, in the case of the conflict though, I think he would be, if it's something that's localized, he's going to be more in tune, or they, or whoever is running the Bucks County Department of Health, is going to be more in tune to what's going on in our county as opposed to somebody out in Harrisburg. And that's the only reason I said the local level of government, just because of their proximity to it. And we do have a Bucks County, if we didn't have a Bucks County Department of Health, then the next lowest level is the state. but since we do, that's why I said local, it's just a philosophy I have in general as it relates to education. But I agree with, I can go with the state if that's what we decide higher, as long as the word health is in that policy. No, health,
It says health officials, second line.
yeah, but the blue, it gets kind of squirrely when the regulations of the higher level of government. Because who's higher, the health department or the Secretary of State, or whatever. So that part has to be cleaned up for sure.
Ms. Stone?
I actually think that you can eliminate that statement of if there's a conflict, because that's where we have to follow what the laws are. That's when we would turn around and go back for legal advice or go to the State Department. So that's going to be a requirement. So I think we can eliminate that in the event of a conflict. If there's a conflict, we're going to have to try to find a legal way to resolve it. So I don't think it needs to be listed here. That's one. Second, I think we're all agreeing that the board is not going to make health decisions. So we are requiring that we take the guidance and orders, which means regulations, which regulations are devised from laws. So it should say requires the guidance and orders, and then you can say from the state health department and local health department. And I'll read something that from the Pennsylvania State Supreme Court, okay, which we all received in our emails. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court has interpreted the interplay of these provisions of state law by ruling that while local boards and departments of health can impose more stringent rules on municipalities, they cannot have more relaxed requirements. So at the local level, municipalities with the benefit of access to similar expertise enjoy the prerogative in enacting additional laws, but they cannot be more relaxed than the state law. They can be more stringent. So this is the law. So if we eliminate the conflict, we don't need to have that in there at all, and we say that the board requires that guidance and orders from the PA State Department of Health and the local Department of Health, because if they make it more stringent, we may choose to make it more stringent. So we put both of those agencies in there, and then that's it.
Okay, so Ms. Stone's proposal, as I understand it, is that we eliminate the blue and we leave the red, but per Ms. Horner's suggestion, we add from state health officials, something like that. Is that?
And local.
How do we, and
It's there.
it says local.
Yes, local
Yes.
health officials.
It says state and local health officials, I think that covers.
But it's not done here.
We're getting rid of this.
Health
Striking
officials
blue.
from
Striking blue.
state health
She's
officials.
talking about having it in the blue, which you're proposing striking
Yes,
conflict.
correct.
Because
So
it's
you don't have to
already-
worry about that.
It's already in the law.
I think it's fine, as I said, I think that's reasonable, and then I think we still get Dr. Damsker's take on it, if he wants to spend his time responding to us, which I think it might be worth his time.
I mean, this may be
Why not?
something that doesn't go on consent, and that's fine, but I think this dialogue is helpful.
Yeah.
Mr. Roosevelt?
Yeah, I'm not trying to throw another wrench into this, but it's probably in the category of nitpicking. But when you say guidance and orders from state and local health officials, it really matters where you read in the comma, right? Does it say state and local health officials? Or are we really implying state health and local health officials, right? It matters where you put that comma and how someone can read it.
But that's why I like Linda's suggestion of adding state health.
I
State health
don't think
and
it's
local.
it's not problematic.
Just
I
add
think
the health in
It
there.
helps, yeah.
Okay.
Ronnie, do you have your orders? Do you understand?
So just so I understand, it's now we're gonna remove the blue altogether.
Altogether.
Mhm.
And the first paragraph is gonna first paragraph, I guess, in order to safeguard the school community from the spread of certain communicable diseases, the board requires guidance and orders from state health officials and local health officials. Established board policy and administrative regulations be followed by students, parents, guardians, and district staff.
Yes.
Excellent.
Actually done.
Just to wrap this up with a nice little bow, can you compare that to what the sentence says currently?
Yes, so it's identical except for the addition, so I'll read what it currently says. In order to safeguard the school community from the spread of certain communicable diseases, the board requires that established board policy and administrative regulations be followed by students, parents, guardians, and district staff. The change is the addition of guidance and orders from state health officials and local health officials.
I think.
Guys, I think we did a great job having a productive and respectful conversation. Good job, guys.
Says with chef.
Thank you.
Don't speak too soon, don't speak too soon.
That was just the first paragraph. I'm sorry. I have one more thing if we could.
Okay.
This is probably not as crazy as the last one. Ronnie, can we go over the part where it says may be necessary to exclude students?
Yeah.
Don't we already do that? And was it in the original policy? I don't see that it's struck.
It's
I mean,
actually,
I don't have a mind, because I'm pretty sure that they
it's
tell
actually
you.
set forth in state law.
Right,
That's state law.
so we're just reiterating what's already in state law?
It's a state law, so we're
So we're
basically
just
saying
putting
we
it-
have the ability to.
Okay, I'm done, that's all I need to know.
Yes.
Like
On that
what
note,
Ms. Stone said,
just
law's the law.
the term excluded, right? I understand what's going on here, and the way this district and many other districts across the country got around it was the idea of remote learning. I'm not getting into whether that's a good idea or a bad idea, but, and this sort of dovetails in with our health and safety policy, where right now, as it stands, 24 hours of fever-free, and you can come back to school. I don't know, and I'm not pushing one way or the other here, but I don't know if we need to put in something that talks about how long you can exclude a student, or does exclusion just mean from presence? Obviously, we're not excluding them from education because we have a duty to educate the students within our district. So I think that we just want to exclude them from building, being in person in the building. We're not trying to exclude them from education.
I think that's a fair interpretation. We're not excluding them from their legal right to an education, we're excluding them from their presence among other people in light of the
Outbreak.
communicable disease that they may have, whether it's a fever, chicken pox, or anything of that nature.
Right.
I think depending on the length of the removal, or, whether it's a broken leg or a fever or whatever, based on the length, I think that's what determines what type of, educational, supports that person.
And perhaps it's better that we don't define any sort of length in this case.
I would
Leaves it up
just
to,
how, yeah.
right, yeah.
I have Ms. Stone and then Mr. Hidalgo. Ms. Stone?
We could certainly just put in they're excluded from the school building and school activities, something like that.
Yeah,
To differentiate from an expulsion or a suspension.
right, yeah.
Does anyone have a problem with adding that? Okay, let's add that, please, Ronnie. Mr.
The school building.
Yeah.
Let me just wait until he's taken his notes so that he can.
So school building, my only thing that maybe we want to talk about is there's events that happen outside of school, right?
And
There's-
school activities.
Yeah, absolutely. And my son just missed his first grade show because he had a fever and, it was at night and he still wasn't allowed to go, and I get it.
So excluded from the school building and school-sponsored activities.
Could I ask, thank you. Could I ask Mr. Spring, where did this language come from? Is this also updated from?
Yes.
Is it PSBA? Okay, because what I see is a very vague language, because it's interesting that people say, oh, the person who got sick, obviously, if you got smallpox or something like that, we're gonna exclude those people. But I interpret it as people who maybe have like a vaccination exclusion, that they're not allowed to come to school when there's an outbreak. Where's that policy? And is that what this is talking about? You know, and we don't have to do, I mean, obviously, just something to look into. I don't think that this policy needs to be rushed. I think adds to another this whole paragraph is great. I mean, obviously, we want to protect kids if somebody, but if it's COVID-19 and we're excluding people from school for COVID-19, now we just, you know, we're back in where we were before. We have to be very careful with this, but obviously, if it's let's say if it's one of the scheduled vaccines we have, then for sure you're going to be excluded. If you have a disease that's on the schedule of vaccinations, then for sure you don't want that child coming into school. So I don't know if that's what it is, but then the other idea is, because it just says due to communicable disease, is that because they have it or they're not vaccinated, and that's where all this.
And I think that's
their
fair.
guidelines.
But I think I'm sorry.
Go ahead, please.
I
I'm not
interpret it
following it
as,
completely.
and maybe I interpreted it wrong, I interpreted it as the person who is ill, and the reason is because it says they may return when the readmission following communicable disease is set forth in the law. And the law talks about how long someone has to be out if they have that disease.
I got you.
That's how
Well, that's probably
my
true. That's
interpretation,
probably
so.
true. This whole thing about the beginning too probably doesn't even pertain to the guidance of health and safety plan, but you know, I thought that to myself too, that maybe that whole argument I made was not even pertinent to what we're trying to accomplish here. So I'm doing my best. So I just don't think this policy is 100% ready, but I'm okay. Whatever, we can always stick with it.
We've been talking about, I don't think it needs to be rushed. I would like to move it, especially as we're all getting, you know, on the same page. I kind of don't want us to wait a whole month because we'll forget and we'll come back in here and be going at it again.
Okay.
So I would like to move it forward. If we pull it from consent, you know, fine. I think it's reasonable to ask Dr. Dembsker for his opinion in the meantime. And if based on his advice, we choose to pull it from consent and have it be another month, fine.
We might be able to work it out on the board also. But I think, okay, I think that those two things sound good to me. Just to clarify this area, whether it counts for, you know, more what it applies to, where I think your interpretation is correct, and then Dr. Dambsker's feedback. This is a big one.
Ms. Stone has something, sorry, before we move on.
It is in the state regs that if a child is not vaccinated for whooping cough, and there's a whooping cough outbreak, that child is excluded from school,
Now, is that just for the classroom or the entire building?
from the school. That's under the state guidance.
Sure, and whatever the law is, the law is.
So that kind of fits in this paragraph, I believe, is covering both cases.
Okay.
And that's how you would want it, right? Because if you have a
Yes.
kid who's, you know, not been vaccinated for something, we want to protect
Yeah, you
them.
don't want them to be here.
It's in here. It says it.
Yeah,
In that paragraph.
Can I speak?
Paragraph is for both cases.
Ms. Khan,
Yes?
That's above hand. Yes.
Thank you. Sorry, I just have a minor, well, first of all, I'm glad, thank you to Ms. Stone, hearing everyone in that first authority paragraph of the policy. I like the elimination of the blue, and I'm glad that we're moving forward and have some agreement. Looking at this last paragraph that we discussed, I'm just wondering if we should follow the same language that we said in that first paragraph of authority, where it says guidance and orders from state and local health officials, where under this paragraph, we said regulations or guidance from state or local health officials, if we should have the same segment of sentence there. That's in both the beginning of our policy and here.
Good idea.
did you hear that?
So I'm changing
No, you're leaving everything in the first paragraph, and then on the second page,
it to and instead of.
Add it the way it's written in the first
yeah, just mimic the
paragraph.
verbiage.
Just use the same language.
Okay. Am I changing?
Thank you.
So to use the same language, my only
You're gonna
question-
say guidance from state
Yeah.
health officials and
From state
local health.
or local health officials, the state and local health officials.
So I'm also, that was my question, I'm changing the or to an and as well.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay,
Yes. Thank you.
other comments on policy 203?
Can I ask one clarifying
Yes.
comment? I'm sorry, I just want to make sure we get it right. When we reach out to Dr. Dansker, what, I just want to make sure I address the concerns the right way. So what exactly am I?
I don't, you'll have to ask Mr. Fidalgo.
I would
Yeah, I'm
ask,
not the only one then. Okay.
I would ask him if that policy, if that first paragraph makes sense to him.
Yeah,
Okay, so read the first paragraph to Dr. Dansker and see if that makes sense to him.
yeah, I think.
Yeah, authority. We're just talking about who has, he'll have something to say about that, one way or the other.
It's a little bit
He
more
knows the law.
muted now that that
He
blue is
lives the
out.
law.
Okay,
but
I just wanted to make sure, I didn't want to call him and not ask him the right things.
Is this for consent agenda at this moment? No. Okay,
I have it.
so it's consent, okay. Other questions? Are you ready? Cell phone policy? Go ahead.
Okay, so those, we've addressed all the policies that would relate to the agenda. This is just a policy for discussion purposes. We've already brought it to the board, identical draft to the board, I believe in November, and to talk about it as well. This is the same draft. I just thought while we were having the conversation, so it didn't fall off, we could, to whatever extent the board would like, have a conversation. For committee leadership, I did forward the policy to the principals. I did get response, I believe, from all the secondary principals, middle school and high school, who indicated that they felt that this policy addressed their needs and how they implement it. Remember, the middle school is currently no. So it met both theirs. I did get I haven't gotten from all 10 principals yet. I'm still waiting for a couple elementary principals, so, but they're at no cell phones as well, which fell under the old policy, but both high school principals as well as middle school came back and were okay with the policy as written, and that was only done at the request of leadership, right, to get that information.
Want to run through it real low, like brief?
Sure, so
As well.
some of this, the main things are, and the main changes really focus around, in definitions, we really want to pull away from naming specific, I think our previous one was talking about,
Beepers and pagers.
talking, Blackberries, I think and because now there's so many devices that have the ability to do these things, smartwatches, phones, and it's every day that, you have pens that can record, and all these other things. We really wanted to focus on ability and what the device can do, rather than specifically naming the specific device, so it allows for flexibility. We also wanted to make sure that we provide exceptions and just really specify the need to have exceptions for health and safety reasons. But particularly we talk, even though pagers are somewhat outdated, a lot of our first responders still utilize pagers. So having them the ability to use that, allowing devices for health reasons, whether it's 504 IEP reasons, device that I know Dr. Sanko spoke about at one of our earlier meetings was an Angel Sense device. I understand, I know kids who monitor their blood sugar due to diabetes using their either smartwatch or their cell phones. So we want to make sure that we are, protecting our students who need it for important health, safety, or 504 IEP-related devices. We want to talk about, as well as providing some discretion and emphasizing that, look, we may have different implementation at the elementary level, middle school level, and high school level, based on what's age appropriate, what the building administrators, the educational professionals feel are appropriate for each of those levels. We do want to make sure that it's consistent among all elementaries, among all middle, and among all high schools, and I think we have that now, which is important.
Is that in there? That's what I was looking for, and I didn't.
Yes. Teaching, I'm sorry, I literally just saw it. We say, use of electronic devices at the elementary level may be different than at the middle school and or high school levels, or may be different between programs.
So-
But read the very next line.
Yeah, I was.
It nullifies that whole statement.
Where are we?
Wait,
Yeah. I was gonna say the same thing, like, I would be more comfortable if we say that, like, as you just said, the policy will be the same at all of the elementary schools, the policy will be the same at all the middle schools, the policy will be, I mean, I understand that that's longer, but I
Right.
would be more comfortable with that than saying building principals have their own discretion.
So what if we?
I don't know if that covers
No, I
everything
think that's
you
fair.
thought, Mr. Hayes.
Use of electronic devices at the elementary level may be different than at the middle level and or high school level, or may be different between programs, and say, we can even add, let's see, usage,
But they should be consistent.
rules shall be consistent among all schools at a particular level.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, all of our policies should be that way.
Correct.
The only issue I have with that is that, each principal might want to tweak things based on their own. That's not what you want. But now you're talking about getting 9 elementary principals together, and they all have to agree on this policy, because there's still going to be discretion.
But doesn't Nicole set the policy? I mean, isn't that her job?
It says, basically, administrative regulatory authority to determine the extent in case, so each principal is going to develop so it's up to Dr. Senka, I guess, but it just says that they're going to determine the extent. And so what the proposal is that each building is going to have it a little bit different. It might be relatively the same. I don't know. This is after consulting the principals. And I know some principals do it different, some teachers do it different. And then even at the end, once you have these regulations, the exceptions are going to just basically, I like the exceptions. I think that you have to let the administrators administrate, the teachers teach. I like the idea that we're keeping cell phones out of the private areas. So there's a lot of, I don't have a problem with this policy at all. But I don't think that we can make things across the board. I think that was one of the issues with other things too, that you gotta let these, like if we make these policies at every school, every classroom has to be the same, that drives a teacher crazy. Because now they have to follow something that maybe that's not how they want to do it. Got to give them the way to teach. It might affect the way they teach kids or whatever. Maybe some.
I mean, I'd like to hear Dr. Senko's take on that. Dr. Senko, wait, do you understand the discussion?
Yeah, I believe so, and if I'm off the tracks, get me back on, please. But I think some of this really could fall under the category of classroom management. And it's relatively, I want to be careful because of the elementary teachers, they work really hard, but it's relatively easy at the elementary level to say no cell phones. It gets more challenging at the middle school and then at the high school because the kids developmentally and chronologically, they're older, and the secondary schools will use devices in different ways than we do at the elementary school. And I'm talking about devices outside the Chromebooks, whether they're using, the phone, their phones to do something, or another device. And, with the implementation of STEAM at the elementary level, there's all kind of technology and devices that are being used in our classrooms that I just want to make sure we don't paint the teachers into a corner when they're trying to do innovative and creative things. So I agree with what Mr. Hidalgo said. We need to have some kind of, the teachers have to have, in my opinion, some kind of latitude to use discretion as it relates to some of these devices. Along the lines of what Ronnie said and we talked about before with regard to the health issues, we do have children with diabetes that check their blood sugar level on the phone. We do have children that are nonverbal AS students that use Angel Sense devices as a safety and security measure. And, you know, we want to support them and their needs and meet them where they are. So while I think this falls under our policy, I think a large chunk of this also falls under classroom management, and putting some of this on the teachers, the way they use the devices is responsible and the right thing to do, so that, again, so dependent upon the level or the class, the grade level or the class that they're in, it could look a little bit different. Was I on the tracks?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I guess my follow-up question, and maybe I'm misunderstanding, but I would have thought, based on the conversations we've had previously on this device policy, that it would be Alan Nicole saying, you know, I think this should be, you know, this should be how it is at this grade level, this should be how it is at the, and you're telling me that the building, and it's fine, but I just want to make sure I'm understanding that it's not coming from Alan Nicole.
I'm
It's something
saying Alan Nicole should provide guidance, and the principal should provide guidance, but the AP biology teacher is gonna have to make the decision that's best in that class for the research they're doing, if and when and how they would use the device, just like the teacher in the nonverbal AS classroom.
Do you then think that there may be one middle school that allows cell phones and one that doesn't?
I think that's going back to your original question about getting direction from Alan Nicole. I think there has to be some global guardrails put up, and then allowing enough latitude within inside those guardrails for people to do what they need to do. Again, I don't misunderstand my comment. I think it's easier at the elementary school, at the elementary level.
It's easy.
Than at the secondary level. But we do, administratively, we do have to put some guardrails up and some parameters. I think we have to build the perimeter that they can't go outside of, and then.
It's quick.
Only, oh, thank you, thank you. Because I know at the middle school right now, they can't have their cell phones. I mean, their phones stay in their locker, you know, so the principals are doing their thing. And then there are times when I guess they make exceptions. But I know that the policy's already there. You're leaving so if the kids abuse it, they're gonna lose it. And that's just the way it is. So I think we're in the right track here.
And that point's right, because at both middle schools, even when I was a middle school principal, the philosophy was off and away during the day. And Matt, you're in a middle school, you can talk specifically of how it's impacted in a positive way with the phones being off. It encourages more face-to-face interaction. It encourages more dialogue among kids at that age. And then, you know, that's the kind of like perimeter that I think we need to build, the kind of guardrails we need to build. But then when Matt is in his club for, I don't even know all the clubs you have right now, but when he's in his club, and he may be asking students to take something out to get a stock photo, create a video, whatever it may be. So I think we have to give some latitude there.
Okay. Mr. Hickey's next, but I'm going to let Mr. Spring sneak in before him, right?
No, I think everything's going. I was just trying to figure out, listening to everything, how we could possibly modify or address it, and just something to throw out there. for that second paragraph under authorized use of electronic devices, building principals and consult with the superintendent and the directors of elementary and secondary education, and in compliance with board policy, blah, 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 are authorized to determine the extent of the use of electronic devices in their building. So now you have Alan Nicole in there as well, set the guardrails, and that would then allow us to remove where in the last sentence of that, paragraph, building principals shall notify students. We could take out establish rules and notify, because we're already talking about how the rules are established above in consultation with Dr. Sanko, Alan Nicole. And that just addresses that they now need to notify.
It's two parts though.
Okay.
I think the way I'm reading it is that it's the building principal's responsibility to communicate this after all the first sentence has been said.
Right.
If you just do the first sentence and you get rid of the last sentence,
Oh.
then there's no responsibility to communicate.
Correct, I'm not saying get rid, saying just getting rid of the three words, establish rules and.
Aha,
Because we're talking about establishing rules in the first sentence.
correct.
But they still are required to notify students, staff, parents, and guardians of all applicable. So
Thank you.
everything stays
Okay.
except those three words, establish rules and, because that's being addressed in the first sentence with the addition of Alan.
Got it.
I like that. Mr. Hickey, sorry.
Yeah, I agree, and to your point, Dr. Sanko, I mean, they do talk about the exceptions. So, you know, you are covered by all of this. I mean, the issue that I have, and you just said it, look at all the good that's happening at the middle school by these kids not having their phones. Why wouldn't that translate up to the high school? The same policy should, you know, if it's something that's needed for a class, 100%. I agree with the technology being used. And I guess part of it's gonna have to go to classroom management, but I don't wanna say I don't want teachers to have classroom management, but somehow there has to be a policy where these kids know that, like, they can't be in their social studies class using the phone, because if there's a kid who has, you know, he needs his device to check his blood sugars, well, he's gonna be on the only other phone. There's not gonna be another one out communicating with him like there is now. I mean, I would maybe just allow, I mean, whether you allow it at lunch is one thing. I mean, I'm not even sure if I would like that. I would like to see the interpersonal communication between these kids. You know, you can establish the rules, but I guess somehow, I'll be happy when I see what is the rule that everybody's establishing, and more importantly, how's it being enforced without having the teachers having to become the disciplinarians. Like,
Phone police.
right, I don't want them to be the phone police. I would rather have something where it's policy, like I said, I said this before, when that kid comes into South as a ninth grader, he knows when he walks into every one of his classes, he puts his phone somewhere, or it's not allowed out of his bag. I mean, you wanna put it in a phone jacket, like, so he knows that, and as he matriculates through the grades, it's habit now, he's not using it, so the only time he is using his phone is at lunch, and I get it, you know, sometimes you, especially for like a kid in high school, he might have to check on his job in the afternoon, or check in with his family, like when to be home, to check on his brothers and sisters that are coming home from the middle school and the elementary school, to keep an eye on them. I mean, there are things that happen like that, but there's also a time and a place for all that, and it's not during your chemistry class, or, you know, it's.
I agree with you, and I think that that's where I'm saying classroom management comes in, because I presume competence of our teachers, and I would hope that a biology teacher is not allowing 10 out of the 25 students in the class to sit there on the phone during a biology lesson.
I have Ms. Stone next. and then
Hi.
Mr. Husband. Oh, I'm sorry. Are you,
Yeah,
Forgot about.
oh, sorry, I'm sorry.
I guess I'm a little confused because we had the principals here and they talked about how in elementary school and middle school, what was the policy? If they're in school, there's no phone.
at the elementary school.
right?
And then at middle school, it was off and away during the day.
Off and away during the day. If that's the policy, then for elementary and middle school, I think that's what should be here. It's often, during the day, it's off and away. And then if you don't want to have more restrictions at the high school level, then you have a separate section of the policy for high school. But to me, this is saying that everybody can do their own thing. And I mean, the one thing that I don't think that the teachers should be policing this. I mean, otherwise, this is just saying that the principals are gonna, in compliance with the board policy, I don't think it's a policy.
Ms. Polly and then
I think-
Mr. Hidalgo, and then I'd like to speak also.
Yeah, I mean, when the principals were here, I think I heard different things from different people at different levels. And what I would like to do or suggest is that we trust our administration to provide the guidelines, and our teachers are empowered to manage their classrooms the way they think it's appropriate. I don't like to say no phones used everywhere in Castle Rock. I mean, you can't tell a 17-year-old not to use their phone. I mean, they use it for good reasons, and I'm sure that the school and the teachers will be able to manage the situation. And they told us they take phones if they think it's not manageable. So I think I agree with John.
I agree with you.
I like this because it's flexible and it allows our teachers and school experts to manage the situation properly, instead of us being the gods telling them what to do. But that's my take.
Mr. Hidalgo?
Yeah, so right now, so there's certain teachers that are known for when you, in high school at South, when you walk into their room, your cell phone goes in that pocket. They have a pocket thing. And that's her discretion. That's how she wants to run her school, her classroom. And then, so if I'm a teacher and there's a student who's ace in my class, if they happen to be on their phone, I know that, I'm just saying, something, maybe, something, whatever. This is me. I'm the teacher, and it's going to bother me. It's not going to let that bother me if it's happening now and then. If there's a student who is abusing it, right, where I feel like they're not paying attention, it's hindering their education, then I'm going to address that. Even if we have across the board rules like you're saying, you're still actually going to put more stress on the teachers to have to maybe follow policy that they would not normally do in getting the education through to their children. And I'm with you. I don't want students on the phones when the teacher is lecturing. But it's not a perfect world, and we sure as heck are not this private, strict school unless we're going to start bringing back the rulers, and now we're going to really get in trouble.
So if Mr. Spring here is an A student in the social studies class, since he's allowed to use his phone since his grades are good, and I'm the D student sitting next to him, but I'm not allowed to use my phone because I'm not a good student, that's okay?
That's a hypothetical.
No, you,
Haven't been watching the hearings? It's hypothetical.
I'm just giving an example. You said if it's not impeding his education, then who cares?
It's a hypothetical.
Well,
All right, it won't be hypothetical.
You guys haven't been watching TV or what?
When you say I'm an A student,
I could have said it.
I was making a hypothetical. I'm not a good teacher, okay?
a few months ago, Dr. Black sent out a survey to everybody about, what emotional issues we're seeing among our students. I forget the exact title of it. I spent some time this week going through the comments, just for fun. The consistent thing in the comments from parents is phones. Phones are a problem, according to these parents who, you can talk about you know, who would be more likely to take a survey and, you know, so on and so forth. But that was the repetitive thing. And I think we have to take that seriously. I also would like to defer to teachers, but there's, you know, our parents are telling us something. They're saying these phones are a problem. And my guess is they're not a problem in the classroom. My guess is that they're a problem in the hallways. So, or on the bus.
And
So I don't know how.
school hours.
It's the biggest problem.
At home, yeah, and, you know, to be fair, a lot of the comments were, you know, this is at home also.
After school hours, we often administratively deal with issues that spill into school. So it used to be that you would get on the bus, somebody would tell you they don't like your shirt, you get off of the bus at home, and you don't talk to them until the next day. There's no off switch now. So students at home or when they're gathered with other friends, they have instant access to everybody at the click of a button or the push of a button. And those things, I don't think you will find an administrator in this district or anywhere else that would tell you that they are not a problem when it comes to that example, because we spend countless hours tracking down Instagram posts, social media posts, Facebook posts. We were talking about earlier, oftentimes if there's something on there that's considered a threat, law enforcement is involved. And that, I would say to you, it falls outside of this, but that is a real issue that we deal with on a daily basis. And, you know, everything from the safe to saves that I referenced earlier to somebody making fun of somebody else by way of a social media post. That's a real issue.
Anybody down this end?
After her.
Okay, Ms. Stone.
Well, I also, I do also wonder how you can say the board prohibits use of devices in locker rooms, bathrooms, health suites, and other changing areas. If they can have their phones, how do you, I don't like policies that you can't enforce. And unless you're following people around into the bathrooms, because,
Get caught, then you enforce.
yeah, but who's standing there to look in the,
If there's a picture on it, that ends up.
I mean, I teach at the elementary schools, and if I walk through the hall, you know, the kids go to the bathroom, and all, you know, I've walked in there and the girls are yapping from two different classes.
But if you don't have the policy, you can't discipline them, but if you have the policy, now you can discipline.
Oh, sure you can discipline them.
So at least you have a
They don't belong.
mechanism to discipline them. If they do it,
If they're in the bathroom,
Turns.
yeah, but
well, they can do that now. Nobody's gonna
you
stop.
can't
them.
monitor it, you can't
Right, no
monitor
cameras,
it at
no
all.
cameras in the back.
But there's no monitoring of it.
But if you get caught with that, like, I'm saying, what we're trying to stop is
It's
people
very
taking
specific.
pictures in private areas. So the best way to do that is say, don't use it. You can have it, but don't use it. If you're in a stall and you're texting somebody, no one's ever gonna give you a problem for looking on the internet if you're in a stall. But if you get caught taking, like, you know, so whatever, I don't know. I'm not perfect at this, you know.
Well, we've had to deal with that.
Yeah.
We've had to deal with that, and I think, again, that is it's different than classroom management by way of a teacher, to what I was saying earlier to Mr. Hickey. When we have a policy 815, appropriate use of technology. And so, you know, we do have some guidance around and policy around this stuff. And then, of course, if it's larger, we've had students make some poor decisions and take pictures in bathrooms, and that's kind of stuff we track down. So no matter what we put in here, unfortunately, it's not going to change the way sometimes that young people are making decisions on what they're doing with their phones and their iPads and everything else smartphones they carry with them. I would like us to be able to say that we could turn them off all night from the time you leave school till the time you get in. But, you know, that's not realistic either.
Mr. Roosevelt, did you have something?
Thank you. I think this policy, as it's drafted, really does a good job of assembling what we've heard from the principals, the various different grade levels, and what we've heard from the individual teachers. It really does a good job of documenting electronic policy as it is, which I think is good. But what it doesn't do, and I don't know if it should, I don't know if this conversation goes to an education committee meeting, but is how do we address the documented issues of attention span, memory recall, lack of social skills, and some of these other problems? And I don't know if we can even make a policy to fix that. You can't legislate good behavior, really, right? So, but I think that to your point, Ms. Oseki, about all of those little comments, I've looked at those also. Some of that also is parenting, right? The school can't parent for children, and if they've got these problems at home, they likely maybe even have them in more abundance at school or less abundance in school. But you're right, we can't necessarily just abdicate it. These devices are, in many cases, impacting the interpersonal skills between individuals. There used to be a joke of like, what do you describe a teenage date, and it's two people sitting in a booth texting each other what they're gonna order and instead of actually talking. So, I mean, it's just an anecdotal, observational joke, but it is something that we have to sort of address. How do we deal with social skills, memory recall, lack of attention span? And I don't know if this policy can do it and should do it. I don't know if any policy can do it and should do it. But I think that that's kind of maybe part of the root of a lot of people around this table, at home, in our community that are saying there's a problem with cell phones. The other question, coming back to whether we have it broad for grade level and across all schools, or where the exceptions are, I liked what Dr. Senko had to say, talking about the guardrails and bringing that down. And I just wanted to ask, does this allow you to do that? Does this remove teachers' compulsion or belief, whether it's positive or negative, that they have to be the phone police? Does this provide enough exceptions and enough sort of homogeneity of how we're going to address this?
That's a good question, and once again, no matter what we put on a piece of paper by way of policy, just like the example I used about, it used to be a time that the kids would have the evening off until somebody said something inappropriate to them the next day. There will still be some students that won't follow the rules, and the teachers will end up confiscating the phone. And at some point, if it happens more than once, then the parents are gonna come and pick the phone up like we do now. So I don't think it's a fail-safe. I think what it does is it gives some guidance and directions while allowing the latitude for the things that we talked about, the medical, the off and away during the day. I think they're the broader things, but I don't see it as being a cure-all. Because we have dealt with and continue to deal with social media issues generally caused by someone's decision to use a cell phone inappropriately, and it spills into school. It just does. I mean, we dealt with a case where we had to wait for a week or 10 days because it spilled into school, and the family of the student that chose to make the post, they were on vacation in Europe or something, right? So it basically transcends whatever we put on paper. But I do think that some consistent guardrails, I don't want to overuse that word, but some consistent guardrails is going to be a benefit to the teachers, it'll be a benefit to the students who choose to follow the rules. And then in that case, I agree, I don't want to see our teachers being the phone police, because the last thing we want to do is be responsible for somebody's $1,000 phone by taking it away from them. But there will be times that happen more often than even I know about, where a teacher has to take somebody's phone away because they did something they weren't supposed to do with it.
Mr. Tate?
I really liked what Mr. Roosevelt had to say. Thank you, Dr. Senko, that really helped clarify it. I liked what Mr. Roosevelt had to say, particularly his point about, I don't know if this policy should attempt to solve a bigger problem. I mean, I understand parents' frustrations, and I think we're doing an admirable job at all levels, particularly at elementary and middle school where the phones are out. I mean, the phones are not in use. What we heard from our teachers and administrators about the high school level is that banning cell phones is not practical. Maybe the board could think about directing the administration to have further discussion about cell phone policy at the high school level. But I don't think we impose a solution with a policy. I don't think that makes any sense at all. I think, we'd like to find the magic bullet to solve the cell phone problem at the high school level, but I don't think a policy is it.
I think that's an interesting idea, and I wonder how that works in practicality. In my time on the board, I have not had discussion in a policy meeting that we say, like, this should be an AR, go talk about it amongst yourselves, like, go figure it out. So how would that work? If we said, like, this is the policy we're gonna go with, but we think you guys should, like, have a further discussion, then what happens?
So then I would go to Al. I would go to, and ask Al to involve the secondary principals. I would want to get some student input in that from our student leadership groups. I would want to consult with some of our guidance counselors and a parent or two and say, look, this is what we think, and most people aren't even going to have to use this because people follow the rules by and large. How can we help you as students, as 9th through 12th grade students, how can we help you be successful here? What do you need us to do as the adults trying to put together some guidelines for our 9th to 12th grade students? 9th graders, you're coming from an environment where it was often away during the day. There's more latitude at the high school. How do we make sure you're not getting yourself in harm's way by making decisions or by inappropriately using your phone? And how do we encourage that interaction that Mr. Hickey said, that face-to-face interaction that I referenced earlier, I've heard from the middle school folks that face-to-face interaction has increased, but I really would like to get a high school student's perspective on this. We heard from principals, the board heard from principals, you heard from teachers. I would like to hear from the students. They're living with it every day.
Maybe parents also? Other comments? Mr. Roosevelt?
I just want to reiterate that I think as a school, we need to figure out some way to address the lack of attention span, slower memory recall, and declining social skills. And I agree, maybe this is an AR, maybe it's, it's something that can evolve quicker than maybe a policy can, because that's really, I think, what people are objecting at. And they look at the cell phones as the reason, but we can all sit here and come up with reasons to include it, reasons to exclude it, but it doesn't really address the main thing that we're trying to resolve, is that interpersonal skills that people need to have, and understanding how to communicate with each other and being able to recall certain memories. I mean, all of us likely remember remembering directions on how to get around places, but now we use GPS. And that's because the brain is plastic. The more we use it to think about this, the more it easily comes, and the less we use it, it deteriorates. There's all sorts of elements that go to that. Yeah, how you learn. Some kids have a hard time learning in school, but they remember lyrics to a favorite song. Right? It's a lot of this. You look at kids interacting, and they're not doing that. So I think that's really what we need to figure out. How do we address that. To some degree, this is something that I think we spoke about my first year. It was a lot more amorphous and elusive than this, but, you know, how do we do that? I've encountered, I mean, we've all encountered horrible incidences of children behaving to either other children using electronic devices, from social media to whatever. I'm aware of kids calling other kids in like a party chat, if we want to call it that, and they'll just yell and scream at this one individual, and then the child tries to hang up, and then they include them back again, and you can't get out of that sort of berating, and it just goes on and on and on for a while. I don't know if that's still happening, or, and that's sort of problematic. That's going toward what we want to discourage. So that's where I'm wondering how this dovetails. I think it's a larger problem, right?
Yeah,
And it
I-
probably comes into education.
I don't know how it ties to like memory and recall and the things that you stated, but you know, we do continue to make concerted efforts with regard to safety when it comes to technology. The board is well aware that we just had the DA's office in, presenting to all of our students and giving reminders, and so we will continue to do that stuff. I don't think there's a magic answer to this. And as you said, Mr. Roosevelt, the items that you outlined, I don't think there's a magic answer to that either. But you're absolutely right in that whenever we try to do something that's proactive to stop some of this stuff, there's always an end run. Technology is advancing. The kids know more than we do in terms of the technology. There's always an end run on it. But it's like putting a lock on a door. The lock is there for the honest people, and no matter what we put on here, most of our kids, we're very fortunate to deal with the students we deal with every day. And so they follow the rules. They follow what rules we put in place. Of course, sometimes they trip and fall, and then we have to do what we have to do in terms of the district, but we are fortunate to work with the kids that we work with and the families we work with.
I know Ms. Stone has something, but before that, Ms. Khan, do you have anything?
I don't have anything at this time. I do like this. I mean, it's a draft and it's a discussion. I do like the idea of going back and asking potentially for the high school students, you know, it sounded kind of like to me like a committee, maybe a working committee to see what, you know, possible ways we could help students at the high school level dealing with this, with cell phone policy.
Ms. Stone?
Thank you.
So is there not a policy already in place, cell phone policy? So if we want to just leave the present policy in place, is that how it would be?
No, because we've made some, I'll let Ron speak.
So, yeah, so the present policy, I mean, one of the issues is it's outdated with respect to devices.
Okay.
The other thing is, you know, there still currently is, the wording's different, but there is still that discretion with respect to, you know, what can happen at the building. So for instance, there's also, you know, there's always the, you know, if it's the determination of the principal based on, you know, educational needs or things of that nature. I think this helps clarify a lot of how the previous policy was written. I think this provides just a clearer roadmap and a clearer understanding.
So as opposed to leaving the old policy in place, should we then just at least put in this policy to replace that, but continue with these discussions?
So I was actually my next question was, what changes do we have to make to this draft policy in order to move it forward if we ask Dr. Sanko to continue to work on the enforcement at the secondary level? What feedback does everybody have that could help us get this passed to, if we say we're gonna still work with the secondary level administration. Mr. Hidalgo.
I think it's fine the way it is.
Okay.
Me too.
Do you want me to make that one change we discussed already?
I mean,
Adding
you're gonna do something.
Al and Nicole,
but
directors of
fine with
secondary.
me.
I think yes.
I think the secondary level is where we need to be more
Yeah.
clear
So I'll
on
make one
that.
change.
Besides that, I think it's pretty clear, especially since we have exceptions in here.
Yeah.
That gives us the ability to do that.
So-
Mr. Hickey?
Yeah, I'm good. You make the changes and, you know,
So then would I bring it back to the next committee? So it wouldn't be anything for this board meeting. It would
Okay.
be, I would bring it back next committee to discuss whether or not to bring it back for first read at the following committee.
And that would give me time to get with Al and the secondary administrators to do what I talked about a few minutes ago.
I just have a thought in response to your question, and I appreciate you asking it. I'm wondering if some of my concerns, some of the parents' concerns get added to purpose, where it's not the purpose section of the policy, right, where it kind of lays out where we're coming from, but it doesn't specifically require, it just provides where we're coming from. Adding into purpose something along the lines of certainly social skills, but I would also think about attention span and memory recall to be put in that purpose area also. As we talk about to support an educational environment, to pack that out a little bit with some of those. So at least students, parents, teachers, administrators get an idea of maybe what we're trying to touch on, and that allows the ARs to evolve perhaps.
I think that's a great suggestion. Anybody have a problem with that?
No, I was thinking that
Oh.
add language when they could apply their discretion,
Right.
that
Yeah.
thought might be in their head.
Right.
Ms. Stone?
If you're just gonna talk about memory recall and so on, I mean, cell phone usage also reduces kids' problem-solving abilities, because all they do is look for the answer as opposed to trying to think it out.
I think, Ronnie, you can, craft that, but obviously cell phone
to
use
name a few.
is, yeah,
Right.
correlated with some.
Cell phones are Satan, just put that in.
And then maybe that is something we can discuss further at an education committee meeting, because I tend to agree with a lot of Mr. Roosevelt's points. And I would, just like we're talking about having a committee for to hear from students about cell phone policy, I would like to have a committee to hear from students and teachers and, Al and Nicole and parents about, those broader topics. Okay, all right, so then the last thing is that Ms. Horner has some concerns. I want to give her any time she needs, and then we can try to ask follow-up questions or try to, discuss. Go ahead.
Thank you. So you all received my emails, and I first want to clarify, my motion was not clarified, so I'm going to clarify that, as well as I have a couple of concerns. And my motion had nothing to do with cell phone usage and communication and taking away anybody's phones. And you got the email to clarify this, as well as Mr. Tate. I spoke to you on the phone, and I also sent you another email on that Saturday. My motion should have been moved forward in the last meeting under the Sunshine Law and under our policy 006, under meeting agenda number 2 and or 4. I was blocked from having this motion moved. The reason I'm doing this is I was informed across Bucks County, elected officials were using chat features, Signal, Google Chats, text. People through the community have come around to me, as well as through Right to Knows, that there have been deliberations as well as deleting messages, which is in bad faith as an elected official. Elected officials have a PA Supreme Court responsibility to be informed and investigate matters before the board as a duly elected director with public oversight powers. There is the PA Supreme Court of Smith v. Richmond. Here's my motion that I read at the meeting. I am making a motion that we collect all the text, emails, chats from those directors and solicitors communicating during the school board meeting for all of 2024 and allow the entire board to see these conversations. These deliberations that are occurring between select members of this board and solicitors may be shared with all members of the board, so all can be informed and in compliance with the Sunshine Act. It is a requirement under the PA Supreme Court ruling, Smith and Richmond, that the will of the people be served by their duly elected Board of Government Oversight Directors to be informed of all matters prior to official action. Anything less would be a detriment to the character of this board and its individual members. So that's my one thing. We have a fiduciary duty to be transparent and be truthful.
I want to, I have a question, I guess. So, and Dr. Sanko, maybe you can fill in the blanks here. So at the board meeting, Anne raised for a motion. It wasn't on the agenda, so it had to come back here. I've not seen a motion made in a committee meeting. So I also don't think that this is the appropriate time, which is why I didn't put it on the agenda as you had, in the exact verbiage that you had requested. Dr. Sanko?
Yeah, I would have to defer to our solicitor on that.
But under the Sunshine Law and under our policy 006, I was blocked.
Can you tell me more about that?
Under the Sunshine Law, under the exception, we received an email 24 hours before our meeting. And this is why I brought it up. That's what made me bring that up. Also under our policy 006. The board may take official action on a matter that arises and brought to the attention of the district within 24 hours prior to a meeting.
I mean,
So.
I guess I'm confused. Are you saying you're being blocked now, or are you saying you were being blocked?
I was blocked at the meeting, correct.
But
Correct.
it wasn't 24 hours, it wasn't on the agenda. Your motion wasn't on the agenda last.
But you're able to bring up, board members are able to bring up any information. You are able to bring something forth, and it could be brought to motion.
Just as
But
a
we can't
general-
vote on anything if it's not been published 24 hours in
No,
advance.
because you can.
We-
You can have a public, yeah, you can do an
We
actual,
do it all the time.
yeah, you can do it. You actually have, then what happens is you turn around and do a public comment, see if anybody has any public comment, and you move it forward.
I think Ann's point, let me help you and try to clarify. Ann wanted to make a motion during a board meeting. And before it was allowed to be seconded and discussed and voted on, she was told, no, you can't do that. So we just moved on. Now, why we're talking about it here, I'm not really sure, but we make motions all the time and change motions. Like at a lot of, I mean, all the time we'll say, okay, well, I'm gonna make this motion instead.
On agenda.
Right, but
On
that's
agenda
different,
items,
that's,
it
yeah, it
Well, according-
it has to be.
But
like
according to
one.
Ann, though, she's saying that according to the law,
Yep.
and I'm not taking a position on it, according to the law, it doesn't have to be that she's allowed to do that.
I mean, we-
There's a Sunshine
Yeah, I-
Law exception 2, that could have been done.
According to Mr. Amuso, who brought that up,
He blocked me.
because he said that the motions have to be, because the public doesn't know a motion is going to be brought up on an item that's not on the agenda. So it needs to be on the agenda before you can make a motion, otherwise the public has not been made aware of it.
That's not true, though.
No, that's not
We voted
true.
on-
So-
That's not true.
We voted on
I'm-
South Stadium, the turf,
I don't know.
Mr.
So,
on the fly.
Yep.
and the,
Sure.
you know, and,
Yep.
and certainly,
I don't
You-
recall that to be.
you brought it up as an old business, new business, you can
Yep.
bring it up as for discussion.
And that's.
And we're
But I wasn't
discussing
even
it.
able I asked for a second motion, and it was granted, and it was shut down.
But
That's,
my other question is, what is it that you're looking for out of this motion? I mean, I'm totally confused. Are you trying to say that we're all we're all conducting illegal actions? Are you saying that we're all
I haven't-
doing something against?
My elected
Against the
position is that I
sunshine
have
law?
to investigate what I'm being asked by the people.
So you're telling me that the people are saying to you that we're texting each other during the meetings? Is that what you're telling me? The public is saying we're all on texts? Look at you grinning. What, is that an answer? Or you're,
Just be truthful and transparent.
I don't know, is
Well,
it?
I think truthful and transparent would be to answer the question.
Yeah,
The public is asking.
the public, what?
Yes, they are.
One person said to you that you called them and
Not one
said, are they, you noticed them texting?
Not one
Yeah.
person.
I mean, I don't understand the question.
Okay.
Here.
Miss-
I mean, I find it, what are you trying to, I'm trying to figure out, what are you trying to get out of it? What is your motive or your intent?
I'll answer.
So there have been, as I said, as I've been informed, there's been deliberations going on different text chats signaled throughout Bucks County by elected officials doing deliberations.
What does that have to do with us?
We're a
Bucks?
school district.
In Bucks County, so somebody specific? I mean, this is specific.
Yep.
So you're making a generalization that somebody in Bucks County, some elected official in Bucks County is misusing text? I don't understand what you're looking for. Mike, are you are you deliberating with text messages during board meetings?
You're asking Mr.
I'm
Roosevelt?
asking, Joe, are you deliberating
Yeah, so let me answer your question.
during
first.
text messages? I'm not.
I'm texting my wife about when we're gonna be like right now, but I'll tell you this. I'll answer your questions. So basically, the reason why Ann brought this up tonight, because she wants this motion on the next business meeting. So that's your,
Well, then,
hold on, can I just answer all the questions?
yeah.
What it is as board members, where I have an issue is if my colleagues are communicating with the solicitor, I want to know exactly what's going on. And Mr. Tate will know this, as long as we've ever been on the board, if any of these, if the lawyers, if the solicitor has ever spoken to other board members, that the first thing they would tell me from East Burnham Gray is, this, whatever we talk about, obviously, you know, I have an obligation to share it with all because that's been the standing understanding for the board. So that I understand, right? And everybody handles it a little bit different. Like, come on, why are you calling them? You know, the bills are going up, this or that. So I've observed, and it's even on television. One time, like when we had no solicitor, for example, when we had no solicitor because unfortunately East Burnham Gray didn't come to their last meeting, and we were voting on a new solicitor. If you remember, when we were voting on getting Mr. Clark and his group into the board, the seat was empty, and at one point, Miss Polly leaned over and looked at a phone your phone, Mr. Tate, that you gave to her, and she's looking at this, and Mr. Roosevelt says, wait, let me see what it's on TV. You know, let me see what that is. Will you show all of us what you're showing? So I'm assuming that you were getting, and I'm only assuming, because unless we know different, that you're getting some kind of consultation. I can only assume by who, but without knowing, that's one instance that we know for sure that is on tape, that there's something going on. I see Mr. Amuso, or basically, if I remember, out there texting a lot. It could be to anybody. But the real easy thing, if you all can just sign an affidavit saying that you never texted the solicitor during the meeting, because that's what I care about. If you guys want to have information to each other, like, yes, there's probably very, very little do I ever text somebody during a board meeting, but I can't say that I haven't received texts from other people during the meeting. I have not texted the solicitor. And that's what I'm trying to, me personally, what I'm getting at is if the leadership is texting or any board members are deliberating about something, and I've witnessed it at least once, then I just want to be fully informed of what's going on.
So you want me to sign an affidavit saying that I've never texted the solicitor during a board meeting?
I'm not saying well, let me,
You would like me to?
hold on, wait, right, yes.
Okay.
That's not what Ann asked. Ann, you wanted all.
No, this is different. Hold on.
Everybody.
Okay, so let's keep moving on, because I think I believe that's what she wants to, look,
Yeah.
you could vote no for it, but I do believe that we'll find out why we keep pushing through this thing, what other board members are actually are entitled to when it comes to deliberation. Because the last thing I want to do is pry into people's private conversations, even other board members,
I'm glad to hear
okay?
that.
So listen to that. But when it comes to the solicitor, all bets are off, because we are all equal clients. We're paying that bill, and that's legal advice. And we had a board understanding, whether you know it or not, that any of that information that is, we are all equal clients to this. So that's what I'm saying. So just, that's where I draw the line. And I'll be happy, I will show anybody any text that I've ever given to any board member, no matter how embarrassing you think it might be. I'm never gonna hide anything from anybody, because that's the best way to live life,
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah.
You know, I really just try to live life like God's looking over.
Are you telling me I couldn't call the solicitor if I had a question? He's obligated to
can.
tell you?
Yes, that's what I would get.
No, I don't know that that's true. I think there is.
Well, I'm paying the bill just equally as you.
Each individual has the right to talk to the lawyer, and there's a.
Well, I'm glad we're talking about this.
Confidentiality
We'll work that out.
between, I bet many of you have called lawyers and gotten legal advice and haven't
What,
shared it.
solicitor? I'm talking about the solicitor that's being paid for. I mean, I appreciate the open
Yeah,
dialogue.
But
I actually like talking.
we have the right to call the solicitor if we have a legal question.
But I've always been under the understanding as a board members that when you get that call, the disclosure is, whatever you say to me, I'm gonna share with the rest of the board, because you're not just, that guy's not just working for you, that's how it's supposed to be. And number two, what Mr. Cox would say to all of us, don't ever, just understand, whatever you put in your text or in your email, understand that one day that will probably be open to a right to know, because that's covered under right to know. That's legal advice. You might be getting a different, this new law firm might see things differently, but I'm just telling you, God's honest, and I'll tell you the truth, because I'm saying it right here, that's my understanding, that, and you can argue it, but maybe you need to
I
be
can tell
a little
you,
more.
I have never called the solicitor, any of the solicitors, and I don't have anything that is related to school board business is on our email site. If I wanted to ask Mr. Amuso anything, it's an email at crsd.org.
Well, there you go.
That's where it is.
Well, we asked, and you
Okay,
told.
Mr. Roosevelt is next.
Good job.
Mr. Tate had,
I think you were
Yeah,
first,
Mr.
but.
I was, but I'm happy to defer to Mr. Tate first.
Yes, it's interesting, had a conversation with Mr. Amuso this afternoon, trying to understand the issues that we're gonna discuss tonight, and, you know, what the law says and what the law doesn't say, and that very issue came up about a board member consulting the solicitor, and he was very clear. He said, if a board member consults the solicitor about an issue that board member has, that board member is entitled to attorney-client privilege. If the board member asks the solicitor, what should the board do about this particular matter, then that should be shared with the entire board. That's two different things. So an individual board member, if you have a conversation, Mr. Hidalgo, with our solicitor, that's private between you and our solicitor. If
That's not true.
I'm telling you what Mr. Amuso said to me.
Right, so I think.
So if you disagree, that's fine. That's the perspective he gave me.
Well, I'm
The other-
just putting on record and we'll figure it out from here.
Yeah,
To
the other,
clarify more too is when we are in board meetings, there
Right.
should be no deliberation of any board members together.
That's correct.
Yeah, I don't-
I've never deliberated anything.
I'm not
Don't
done.
just-
I'm not done.
She's
I'm
not
not
done.
Sorry, Ed.
No, that's all right. The larger issue about text messages among board members, I think it's been made clear that there's concern about something nefarious going on and that we need to be honest. Well, no one's ever accused me since I've joined the board of being dishonest. We are not, as I think I can speak for Ms. Pally, we're not as leadership withholding information from the board. There's nothing secretive going on. If I ask Mr. Amuso, if I lean over during a board meeting and ask him a question, it's probably guidance how to proceed. Do we do this motion? What do I need to do? A roll call vote or whatever. That's the kind of thing we're probably talking about. It's not anything nefarious. And as far as the motion that Ms. Horner wanted to make at the last board meeting, our solicitor told us that was not possible based on the law.
Eyes wrong.
And if he's incorrect, then prove us that he's incorrect.
Right.
But I follow the solicitor's advice during a board meeting. So the question was also asked by Ms. Horner, how does a motion get on to the agenda? And the short answer is the proposal comes to a committee meeting. We discuss it as we're doing right now, the question about text messages. And then if there are a majority of board members who want to move that forward as a motion, then typically what we do is we explain to the administration what this motion is intended to accomplish. And the administration and the solicitor draft a motion that is then put on the agenda for the next board meeting. It's a pretty simple process.
Question, if I could.
No,
No, I have to,
Mr. Roosevelt was-
no, this is actually responding to what he said. It's very important, if you don't mind.
No,
It's fine, no, thank you, Mr. Roosevelt. So you told
I
me
will
just now
respond.
that Miss,
Come on.
hold on. Mr. Amuso told you that you have a client attorney, a privilege, so do you pay, you don't pay his bills? I'm just gonna talk, because I know if I stop, I'm not gonna be able to.
no, it's not me. It's not me. It is every board member has the opportunity to have a private conversation with our solicitor and it be protected by attorney-client privilege.
Okay, so 9 of us, so during a board meeting, okay, that to me doesn't sound right.
I didn't say during a board
He's
meeting.
not saying, he's saying that's separate.
No, but I'm
My
saying,
concern is
my
the
point is
board
this, my point is, I don't believe that, see, what I have a hard time with is now, we have one client represented by 9 board members. And if this attorney is not obligated to be open and truthful about other conversations with.
He's obligated to be truthful.
You're saying attorney-client privilege, which means that his discussion, that's totally what I have not been told over the time. So I'm gonna question that. Do you think that that was the same under other solicitors, or is it just this solicitor? Do you think it was, did you have attorney-client privilege with previous solicitor firm?
I assumed so, but I've never talked to an attorney and didn't think I was protected by it.
You never had any, you
I don't
never
think
had
that
them tell
often,
you?
to be honest, but
Never had them tell you that, what happened to, I represent the whole board, not just one board member?
I don't see that as a
When we
conflict.
Okay,
talk to this, when you
that's
talk to
fine.
the solicitor, I've never spoken to the solicitor, so either one we've ever had. But when you talk to the solicitor, aren't you supposed to be discussing board business? in which case then it should be shared. Like, if you're talking to him about a personal problem that, I don't wanna say you.
Can I?
If I'm talking
can I
to the
give you an
solicitor about a
example?
problem that I have,
I mean.
that's a personal
wait.
problem that's
Can
not
you
covered.
clear this a little?
Yeah, I think he's getting himself in trouble,
All right,
to be honest with you.
Say I
Mr. Amuso, because
think that
you're denying us the same
Something
advice you got
is
for school
not-
business, we don't get
as a board
it.
member,
Yoda, can you start again so that we can all hear?
I'm giving you an example.
Okay,
I think that Mr. Tate is doing something inappropriate or illegal as a board member. I have the right to call the solicitor,
Hypothetically.
hypothetically, of course. I have the right to call the solicitor and discuss this and be protected. And the solicitor will have to investigate and I don't know what else. So there is client confidentiality, right? Attorney-client privilege. And there are cases like that. And I'm giving you that as an example. I have other things to say, I just don't want to take somebody's time because I know
But
we're
if
going
it's
through.
a board issue, it should be all informed, all
Oh,
board.
I got a question.
Informed about.
So if I got it, no, one more time,
And
this is very important.
Roosevelt has been
Mr. Tate,
interrupted.
Mr. Tate, this will be my last
I'm
time.
sorry, but we're not following
This will
order?
be my last,
I have stuff to say, but.
Very
it seems
important.
like
I know,
Each
I know.
person-
because Mr.
Okay.
Tate and I are going back.
Guys, I'm doing my best here. Mr. Hidalgo.
Thank you.
And then.
So, and I'm gonna
the rest
stop
of the
after
board,
this.
Okay?
So, Mr. Tate, if I had put in, some attorney-client privilege stuff where I just spoke to the attorney, right? And I talked to the attorney about another board member, and I asked questions. And that's private because it was between me and that attorney. If he let the other board members know, now he broke attorney-client privilege. Okay?
Miss-
And you admitted it.
If it's something that. and
Mr.
then-
Roosevelt.
Thank you.
And I'm happy to find out that happened.
I think that this is interesting because there's multiple different layers. And I recognize that sometimes there needs to be some back and forth and sometimes there needs to be an order. What I was going to comment on was the sunshine law was you can't change the agenda if you're within 48 hours. And I believe that Mr. Amuso was providing counsel that you don't add something to the agenda within the 48 hours on the meeting. Whether it's allowed or not, I believe I heard him say the courts haven't been favorable to that. So I think that was the idea. And I don't know if it was important for you to get it on the agenda or get it on the agenda that meeting, which is, I believe, where my suggestion, and I think Mr. Tate and I were working back and forth, that this go back to policy. This is before I really understood all these different levels. But that's, I think, how it came back to policy, for this board to discuss it as policy. I agree with the process that Mr. Tate outlined on how it gets here. During the meeting, my suggestion was, well, it can be on the next meeting. A board member is making a motion, perhaps not for this meeting, but for the next meeting. Now, that seems to be permissible. For Mrs. Horner's point, it's well beyond the 48 hours. It's effectively a whole month. So I think that's one element, that I'm accepting the counsel from our solicitor to not do fly, a fly type of motions for the meeting. But it could be on another meeting. Regarding what her intent is or all of this, it is in the news that this is happening at other boards. So whether it's her, a group of constituents, doesn't really matter too much. I think we as a board do not want to provide what happens almost every board, where there's people in the community that are assuming that nefarious things are happening with leadership, whether it's solicitor or whether it's administration. It's been happening, at least I'm aware, of several different boards it's happening, and it's not. You guys are probably talking about stuff. So the idea, I think, was let's just prove that it is that. Now, whether we need to or not is a whole separate conversation. I think that in the past, there's been multiple pieces where leadership is assumed of being secrecy. And I know from my experience as vice president, I believe it was concluded that also, but it wasn't. I'm much in the same boat as Mr. Tate, Mrs. Pally, that you're talking about how to get through the meeting and get through the advice of that. So I can perfectly extend that to Mr. Tate as well. On the topic, because I was writing notes, we've gone through this, on the topic of attorney-client privilege, it is interesting. The point is, regardless of whether it's right or whether it's wrong, the district is getting billed for every conversation that the solicitor has with us. And previous board retreats, we've discussed how do we want to handle ourselves and manage ourselves as a board. And largely, I think in our recent experience, the whole point has been talk to leadership or write an email, right? It's not every one of us having individual calls. And whether Mr. Amuso is right with that or wrong, that each individual board member has attorney-client privilege, it starts to leak into the assumption that people have had with leadership being secrecy. And I don't think we want to do that. We want to establish a level of trust amongst ourselves. We need to establish a level of trust to the community, and we need to figure out as a community how to get beyond these secrecy suspicions. I've had conversations with people in the community around leadership changes, and the stuff that they were saying to me happened. I'm thinking, oh my God, this is wild. Where is this coming from? And that's, I think, something that this board needs to figure out how to address, so that we're not always thinking the worst of each other, where the minority is thinking the worst of the majority, and then it flips, and it's kind of like, well, you did this to me, so I'm going to do this to you, and this sort of childish regurgitation around and around. We need to figure out a way for this district to get to calm things down. So I don't, whether it's true or whether it's not, I think it's bad practice for us as individual board members talking to the solicitor and expecting them to keep it all. That's a lot. And while it may happen, and while maybe I could extend a thought that maybe leadership is in a different category as the rest of the board for that individual attorney-client privilege, I do not think it's a good idea for all 9 of us to be calling the solicitor expecting, well, getting individual attorney-client privilege, and then getting the districts getting billed for all of this. And that's, I think the taxpayers would have a hard time with us and with the board if we were each calling the solicitor to talk about our individual problems on the board. So that's just some of the things that I wanted to take, but I kept that back because I wanted to allow some of this conversation, so.
I'm going to Yoda first, and then Ed.
So, but what I hear is that there is the assumption that we deliberate with the solicitor during the board meeting. And again, I said that before. The solicitor is sitting next to me. When I was the president, he was on my left, now he's on my right. What's the point of me texting the person when I can just do this and ask the question usually about, the process? And there is no deliberation among us because at the meeting, we are paying attention to what is happening. I mean, we have these committee meetings, and in public, we spend hours and hours and hours deliberating. To assume that we do something unlawful behind, our phones, there's no trust, and it's like an accusation in bad faith. So I would really prefer if we find a way to trust and work together and not make assumptions because somebody said something in Bucks County doesn't mean it applies to us.
Mr. Tate?
Yeah, I was just going to agree with what Mr. Roosevelt was saying. I mean, it's ever since I've been on the board. I don't think I ever talked to our prior solicitor except during the year that I served as president. Typically, when I have a conversation with Mr. Amuso, there's 4 of us on the call. Dr. Sanko, Ms. Polly, and the solicitor, as we're working through board business, trying to figure out, what makes sense in terms of scheduling or, an issue that we ought to plan an executive session on or something like that. So I have very few, it's very rare that I have a private conversation with Mr. Musso. The conversation I was talking about today, Ms. Polly was on there. We were trying to figure out a point of order about tonight's meeting going forward. So yeah, I mean, we have to be cognizant of that, but I can tell you that in my view, Mr. Musso sees his job as ensuring that we follow the law in the way we run meetings and the way we operate. And we've had extensive discussion about right to know and sunshine, and we're going to schedule an executive session. You know that because we shared that by email today. We're going to schedule an executive session to talk about those issues so that we all understand what the law says and doesn't say, so that we're compliant. I think he and his law firm, his colleagues, they're intent on us following the law. They see that as their job, and we are too.
Ms. Stone.
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate again that I have done nothing illegal. I have not texted any board member or the solicitor, any solicitor, during any board meetings in the past year. And I would hope that you would accept that statement from me as being truthful, okay? And the second thing that I do take offense to making the motion that you did, because I think it's a detriment to this board to put that kind of a conspiracy theory in the minds of the public who are trying to trust us to take care of the business at hand. And that's just, this is a distraction from doing the business at hand, to make these accusations about your team members. We've been working together, doing a great job on all these topics, the policy issues. We had a great meeting.
Facilities, right?
On the facilities meeting, where we're all getting our ideas out and our opinions out in a cooperative manner. But to raise the issue that you did in the way that you did is insulting to the rest of the board and very, very damaging to how the board looks in the eyes of the community, which I know you're very concerned with.
Right, and I'm an elected
Okay.
official too, and I have to go and I have the right to do an investigated matter when I have constituents that can come to me.
So you calling me a liar?
I never said that. Did I say that? Did that come out of my mouth?
The answer
You
is
said
no.
you don't want to,
Did I
you're not
tell you?
trusting what I,
No.
do you trust what I just said to you?
Yes, yes,
Okay, so do I have to provide you with,
no.
thank you.
What, not with it?
Haddad.
Thank you. So,
Bless you.
so we call, I have definitely going to have more to say and more, I would like more from our solicitor at the meeting. I'd prefer to do it in public record than to waste time on an email. It can wait till the meeting. Because we're a board of 10, right? They usually say. So I have a hard time grasping this attorney-client privilege for each member of the board, because what you're saying then that maybe Dr. Sanko is also covered by attorney-client privilege. And if not, it's a ridiculous thing for him to say that you're covered under attorney-client privilege when you're talking about board business, because I think that goes to what Ann's saying. It's probably infringing on our rights to get the information that we need to execute our duty. So it's not going to be done tonight. But I think you've offered a lot more information that's really going to help us try to clear it up. Because obviously, unfortunately, what happened is the way that this new board started, with not being, and not meeting the solicitor until after he was voted in was really why there's no trust. So you really got to look at yourself and realize this all goes back to, and I'm surprised because in my business, I would have never kept that firm if he treated my colleagues the way that they did not even offer to come out and speak to us. We never even got that proposal that was dated back in November, which is still a very big thing to me, and I might as well just say it. You guys got a proposal from a firm that had lower rates that you did not disclose, and then we end up paying, you negotiate higher rates than what was proposed. Mr. Clark said at the meeting in April that he had given you this proposal letter so that you could, use it to compare with other law firms that the five of you were looking at.
Something new to say, Joe?
Yes, I do, because that April.
This is off topic.
That's not helpful.
So you're not being helpful. So the thing is, yes, my idea is that you negotiated higher rates than what they were originally proposed to you. I think you broke your fiduciary duty, and I'd like it investigated. And I'll say it here again. I want some authority to take a look at you. Well, answer this question then. You want to answer a question? My question is, why didn't you give that letter to the administration? Or why did you hide that letter? You never, that's the question. You said I had 5 days. Martin Luther King was Monday. I'm not going to let it go until you answer the question. Why did we only find out about this letter after a person, Tim Daly, did a right to know? And all of a sudden, I'm going to tell you something. If I went and I hired a firm and they had originally given me lower rates, kind of sounds like Ask a little bit. It's a lot like Ask, if you remember that technology company. And I said, oh, that's your rate? I'm going to put that right here. Go ahead.
So are you insinuating
I'm
that,
insinuating that there was that the first order of business that you did when you got on this board, Mr. Secchi, was to hide pertinent information about the legal fees that were proposed to you?
are you insinuating that one of us is skimming off the top of the legal bill?
What I think is you were offered $195 and you chose not to hold your solicitor to it because he's not my solicitor, he's your solicitor. You hired him. Yes.
All right, who's next?
It's a
We
big
got off
deal.
topic, and I'd really like to just get back and make sure we can stay on topic. These are my concerns, and
Oh,
these are,
okay, well, I'm.
Just have the motion
here.
next week.
Can we,
so,
I guess the question is,
Want the
can we raise this motion next week? Can that be
That's
put
what
on
I
the?
want.
We are, just say yes.
Okay. It does take 5. Nikki, do you have anything to say?
It takes 5?
Thank you. By the way, just for the sake of when everyone's just talking over each other, it's really difficult to follow along the conversation. I, for one, know all your voices, so I can kind of figure out who's speaking. But if you ever wanted any person in the community, that we the people, to follow along this conversation, it would be rather difficult. Okay, so along with that, I thought initially there were like 2 things going on, which one was a procedural thing of how to create a motion, and then the other portion being accusing select board members, which I guess I don't understand or need a definition of whom the select board members and select solicitors are, of illegal activity. In terms of everything that this conversation kind of devolved to is clearly counterproductive. The thing that kind of came back into my mind is we are all elected board directors. We all take an oath. We all had to do our trainings for, Sunshine Act, what that means, what deliberating means, looks like, sounds like. And over the past year that I've been on the board, I think about all the work and things that we've done, even as I think a couple of you had alluded to this evening, our really robust discussions around policy, our, kind of first time ever discussion of this holistic view, comprehensive view of the facilities master planning process that we had kind of embarked on in the past year. And then everything that I'm hearing in the last hour has nothing to do with the work that we're doing for student achievement, student growth, and the success of every single child in this district. This sounds like someone doesn't like something, and so we're going to just keep bringing it up. And it has nothing to do with the matter at hand. It doesn't have nothing to do with our ability, but it does constantly create this fracture in the board, where there's times, I've heard even this evening, that we can kind of have, good conversation and hopefully lead to some sort of decision making. I personally am offended to think that, I took an oath and that I'm somehow colluding or deliberating and making these board agency decisions at board meetings, all of which, by the way, are recorded. So you could see if there was any actual discussion of deliberating going on cell phones. I mean, that would take a considerable amount of time, I would think. So I'm not sure what is being asked in terms of accusing. Again, for speaking for myself, I have never texted or called solicitors in regards to any board deliberating. I took an oath. I took it very seriously, and I think it's really, truly counterproductive and not good for the district or this board to sit here and point fingers and accuse people of illegal activity that apparently was done at the county level somewhere that is very vague. And I will just end that. Thank you.
Me?
You're up.
I get to go? Oh, okay. I would echo Ms. Khan's comments. I mean, anybody who knows me, it's like, I don't know, 8 years ago, I got a speeding ticket. I don't break the law. And to come in here, and it feels like every week, it's like I'm being accused of breaking the law. And it's like, we can't move forward. And it's taking time away from the kids of the district. We really work hard for the district, and I would never accuse anybody at this table of breaking the law. I mean, to hear that you really think that we're breaking the law, it's a wild accusation, and there's been no evidence of it because it didn't happen. I can tell you that all the deliberations that I'm part of are basically at this table, maybe in the boardroom, but they're in the public. That's what we do. We all take the Sunshine Law very seriously. I know I do. And at the same time, I still have a right to privacy. And I didn't give that up when I became a board member. And I mean, if I text Ed in the middle of a board meeting and I say, Ed, you have something in your teeth, and it's on camera, I mean, that's a private communication. And it's not anybody else's business, and I'm not, it's private. We still have privacy.
One last thing, and I'll stop. The one question that nobody ever answered, and that's why we're still here today, and we could try to clear it up right now. You didn't share the November engagement letter with Mr. Sanko or anybody when you interviewed with Rudolph and Clark, okay? I didn't get, when I got a phone call from Mr. Tate, I was surprised at what he said, how he did. Can you all tell me why you didn't share the information? There was not an email saying, this is the solicitor that we are gonna propose, and we got 5, and I knew they had 5, but we never got a chance. Here's his phone number. All I heard was I got a phone call. I'm pretty sure all of us just got a phone call. There's no email. The administration never got the engagement letter. The engagement letter from November is titled just the same as the one that you say is the actual proposal. So what I'm saying is that you still haven't, so when you say you answered all my questions and you had 5 days to ask, that letter was never, and I never said the word illegal, but I don't know what it is. But I can tell you right now, it doesn't sit right. So can one of you tell me why you didn't share it with Dr. Senko or the business manager? That's what I want to.
Mr. Roosevelt is next, but I think, do you want to?
I just want to say that, one, we were not members of the board. Two, we didn't do anything
You
illegal.
weren't covered under
And
immunity.
three, if you want to rehash this whole thing, I would suggest you listen ad nauseum to every board meeting where we answered every one of your questions over and over and over.
What about that last
Go
one?
listen to the.
Why didn't you give the letter to anybody back in November? Or even,
And second of all, I would not call it an engagement letter. But if you want, because that's different than an introduction letter. Now, if you want to get more details, I would suggest you listen to all the answers we've given to you over the past year.
so why didn't you give the?
That's it, I'm not answering anymore.
So nobody didn't answer the
Mr.
question.
Roosevelt?
We'll leave here
But
tonight.
answer.
Nobody will answer.
Mr. Roosevelt and then Mr. Hickey.
Thank you. I'll be quick. I think we all recognize at this point that board members are entitled to equal and timely information. That's something that is woven in through this. The next thing is to sort of shape perhaps Mrs. Horner's aspect and to dovetail into what I was saying and also what Mr. Tate was saying, is more of a question that I don't necessarily expect anybody to answer now. I think it's for all of us to ponder. Do we owe the community proof effectively that we're not doing what other boards have been allegedly accused of? That, once again, this is more of a rhetorical thing. I don't necessarily think Mrs. Horner was specifically accusing any one of you. If she did, she would have the proof and she would put it out there. I think it's more along the lines of how do we establish a level of trust between each other and with the community? And that comes back to my question, what do we owe the community to prove that Council Rock School Board has not done what other boards have allegedly been accused of or done? I haven't followed it too much. That's sort of a rhetorical thing, because that gets back to the whole element of, is leadership doing something nefarious, right? Leadership is entitled to sort of administrative conversations, as Mr. Tate outlined with Dr. Sanko and the solicitor, and that could be perceived and has been perceived as nefarious. And how do we get beyond that? Because it's probably wrong. Mr. Tate, please don't misunderstand me. I was in the same situation, and I was accused of the same or similar or other nefarious acts that I wasn't doing. I think that the board needs to figure out how do we resolve that once and for all. I don't have the answer. I don't know if we can. It's just sort of a rhetorical question of what do we owe and what can we do? And I'm just trying to put that out there to maintain a level of collegiate discussion, which I agree this board has done a pretty good job of lately. And it would be sad, I think all 9 of us could agree, if that devolves again. So if we can continue to speak to each other and not, and this goes to the community as well, not assume nefarious acts just because we're in a position that we are. I think that we owe that to the district. I think we owe that to Dr. Sanko. I don't know how to do it, but it's something that I'd like to do. Ever since I was on vice president, I've been trying to figure out how to do it. So
I'm going to let Linda respond to you, Mike, and then I'm going to go to Mr. Hickey.
I agree, it'd be wonderful if we could find a way to prove that nothing's happened. But how do you prove a negative? If there's nothing happening, how can you prove it? And the way to continue for us to work together is to keep working together and not bring up conspiracy theories over and over, because that
It's not a
puts-
conspiracy theory, it's in fact,
That's
that's
put-
bringing, as
that
an elected
puts-
official, I was
That's
asked.
put ideas in people's head that don't exist. So we've been working together fine. And I think, bringing up, that we should all be releasing our private emails because we're doing something nefarious, accusing us of doing something nefarious during board meetings, is putting a wrench in the fact that we have been cooperating.
Yeah, like.
And that's why I'd like to just say, well, let's drop it and let's continue doing the great work we've been doing.
I didn't suggest that I had the answer. I
Yeah.
just wanted for all of us to ponder that in our moments on how to get back and forth from this pendulum swing. And I also want to make sure that this board isn't put in a position where someone says thou doth protest too much, right? So I think we just need to, I don't know.
Yeah.
Mr. Hickey?
Yeah, it kind of all comes back to, like I said, I don't have a stance on it, I'm not sure what you actually want to get out of your motion. What is the end result of it? What is the actionable item that will happen? However, I think that just the question that happened, was she raised the motion during a meeting, was told that she wasn't allowed to. So now she's here looking to raise the motion again at our next board meeting so we can decide whether or not we want to proceed. However, keep in mind that even if we vote no, that we're not going to proceed with this motion, that Ms. Horner is of the contention that she can bring this motion up anyway, even without the 5, and it's well within her rights according to the law that she's stating. So whether we say no or not, she's going to bring it up, and Mr. Amuso can say, well, no, you can't bring it up. And as I said to Mr. Tate, I know past practices, now maybe we did it illegally, but we voted on turf. I wasn't even a member of the board then, but the turf at South was voted on as a motion that was not on the agenda at the night. So precedent has been set. Now, whether we did it illegally and Mr. Amuso's right and correct us, then we just move on again. But I'm just saying, I think what Ms. Horner wanted with all this conversation was, hey, can we bring this motion up at the meeting? Do I have permission?
Yep.
But even if I don't have permission, keep in mind that I still think that legally I'm allowed to do it anyway, even if you guys all say no.
And this is not to be accusatory, this is, again,
And to bring it
fiduciary
forward.
duty. I have a fiduciary duty to be transparent and to be truthful. And I was asked, and I am doing my elected duty, and this is why I've asked for it. Because there has been question, and there has been across Bucks County. And there's several instances. And I have not said that I was accusing anybody, but I am doing my elected duty.
Mr. Tate?
I'll see if I can wrap this up. First of all, I think what Ms. Stone said about proving a negative is an important point. That came to mind before Linda said it. It is pretty hard to prove a negative. If people want to believe that something happened, there's not much way I can convince them that it didn't happen. But I understand, Mr. Hidalgo has talked about the solicitor issue for about 15 months now. And I understand, well, longer than that actually, but I understand the way that the board chose a new solicitor frustrates you. It's time to move on. We need to focus on the work we need to do. And finally, as to the proposed motion regarding disclosure of board members' text messages, I think it's a bad idea and I'm not in favor of it.
I think that's the next thing, is to kind of go around and see everybody's temperature on that. So maybe Mr. Hickey will go this way.
I'm going to defer for a moment.
Ms. Stone?
I find that it's really insulting, and as much as you say it's accusatory, I don't think you really understand the impact of making this a formal issue. I also don't believe that one person on the board can decide the agenda. I think that's the whole point of leadership and the superintendent, to decide the agendas at the board meeting. and I do not. I strongly think it's detrimental to make a motion to collect a year's worth of texts and messages and emails from the fellow board members.
I will go and then I'll continue. I think that the important thing here is that I think all 9 of us take the Sunshine Law very seriously. And that's what the public expects of us. They expect us to have deliberations in public, which we do. There are no deliberations happening on text message or anything else. But at the same time, we're entitled to communicate with each other as board members by phone or other means. You are not entitled to all of our communications. That's not the way it works. I don't know where it ends. I mean, and you know, the privacy, we can talk about, you know, our right to privacy and, you know, wiretapping and, you know, the Google Homes and all these things and go down a rabbit hole. But, you know, I am concerned about where does it end? I have nothing to hide, but frankly, I don't actually know how I would even find text messages from board members from all the meetings. I mean, they're not stored that way. If they were chronological in my phone, you know, it might be different. But no, I think it's a violation of my privacy. And there's no, to say that it's happened at other boards in Bucks County is not a reason to violate my privacy. And I think any court would agree with that. Skoda?
Yeah, I think we, as a board, have accomplished a lot of things. I mean, we did full day kindergarten. We are reviewing the facilities plan. I mean, we can go through like everything that we've done. We passed the budget, we are gonna have another one. We have the director of special ed hopefully coming in. We are addressing, you know, issues that we have with the parents, and we have spent hours and hours in these rooms deliberating publicly, because that's the only way to get all these things done. So I would try to concentrate on the positive. Also, just from a board view, when I joined the board, I was a minority, but I embraced the idea that the board is one entity working together, and we were not supposed, during publicly, whatever issues we had to discuss privately, yeah, but publicly, we appeared as a unity. We are all one board, and you know, yes, we can disagree, but we do not blame each other, we do not point fingers, we do not accuse each other. And I had several situations that I could have done that, but I didn't, because I believe that this is a board that we all care for the children, we care for our students, we want to make things better, and this is what we are doing. Now, I do not text the solicitors during board meetings. I have no reason to do that. And I take the law very seriously about the Sunshine Act. And I've always done that. So I also have the right to my privacy. And if I want to text somebody and say, hey, I'm so bored, and I'm so hungry, I want this meeting to be over, I have the right to do that and not to share with anybody else. So, yeah.
Ms. Horner?
Well, you know where I stand, because it's my motion. So I'm doing what I'm asked to do, and, you know, text, emails, chats, again, I will reiterate on any other chat program, Signal, any of those programs. And during board meetings, it has nothing to do with outside, talking outside board meetings. This is all my directive of board meetings.
Mr. Hidalgo?
So maybe there's some way to do it where your privacy is not violated by maybe having like somebody other than our solicitor, because unless they can, as I said, sign attestations that they've never communicated via text or with board members during any board meeting, then I would say there's no conflict of interest there. So let's just say we get another person to review what were our communications during the board meeting. I mean, I would like to try, I think Ms. Horner has every right to bring up me under the law, to bring up this sooner or later somehow at a board meeting. You guys can vote it down, or we can try to craft something that wouldn't violate your privacy, because that's what I'm saying. I don't want your privacy violated. This is not something, I never thought we'd get here. I wasn't even expecting this conversation tonight. Thought we were getting out of here about 2 hours ago. And then Ann brought it up, which is fine, because I mean, I support her in her quest for transparency. And never accused anybody of being doing anything illegal, but that it doesn't sit right with me the way things have been for the last 15 months, as Mr. Tate said, and then some. So I think maybe if you don't put it on the agenda, she should. This is the notice under law that she's going to bring up a motion at the next meeting, and that should be enough to require. You don't need 5 to vote on something to bring up a motion. Otherwise, why would you even? That doesn't make, another thing that doesn't make sense to me. So anybody has the right to do that. So I know there's parliamentary procedure, but if you need a majority to bring up something, no, that's not how. I'm sure there's got to be a way around it, because that's not democracy. That's not. So let her figure out what to do. Maybe we can, at the meeting, determine what third-party entity you guys feel comfortable reviewing, if we can get this information. I would go so far as to say, well, it just has to be business-related, and we'll leave you guys to your own honesty to only give over what is honest. But what I could say that I think all of us could probably get around is you can hand over the metadata. You can hand over the phone numbers that were texted during the meeting, and that would quickly show if the solicitor was involved in anything. And that doesn't go away. Texts the carriers don't keep those for a very long time, but the metadata is there for a very long time. And if you can get a court to order it, they will subpoena the company for it if you get a judge to do so, request. So it's not where I want to be. I'm not getting paid to do this. I'm not here to ruin people's lives or to cause heck, but I'll tell you this. I do see, when I see something not right, I'm going to ask the questions. And I haven't, you said go back and look, but even tonight I asked a question, and for the record, nobody answered the question, one question. But the texting is a complete different thing. That's me observing board members reading the text, which is board business, and they're acting like it didn't happen. That is where I draw the line.
Mr. Roosevelt.
I'm not accusing anybody of anything. You heard my rhetorical question. I think it's still interesting. I know from the recent right to know complying to that, it was exceedingly difficult and very complicated to go through the iPhone messages. I'm not a technical person to understand how to get to metadata, but it was very difficult to make sure. I'm going through each one and I'm trying to think, geez, that was months ago. I've had a lot of texts since then. And then I was trying to figure out, wouldn't it be nice if I could just search it? And I tried to do that, and that didn't work. So I recognize it's an onerous request that an individual may have a hard time complying to. I would think that there's an easier way to do it, but I don't want to get into that. I think that the lesson learned, the one thing that I haven't said is I think the lesson learned, we know as a board that we should not be deliberating when we're in public, in private. We know that. It's not an accusation. It's something that I think all 9 of us know. And so whether we're texting for private reasons or for that, we just want to avoid the appearance of impropriety and do our best not to do it. I don't believe that I'm completely innocent of this. I responded to the right to know. It was some conversations back and forth that I had with my wife regarding getting ATM stuff and groceries and stuff on the way back. That was one of the only that I found that fit there. But as a rule, when I got on this board, I thought this doesn't look good. So I've done my best to not have any of that conversation. I can't control who texts me and what they say. I also received a text at one point. It wasn't during the date range that was discussed, just for the public understanding. Somebody from the community couldn't hear, like the audio was off. And so there was a little bit of back and forth around that. I leaned over to Mr. Funk to say, Al, I'm hearing that the audio isn't on. And then he went and took care of it. And then somebody, yeah, it's back on now. So there's been exchanges like that, but no agency business. I think that's a really good lesson learned for all of us, not to have any texts or emails during the meeting that cover agency business. And I think it's up to each of us individually, whether we've done that on purpose, on accident, whether we remember or not. I'm not sure where we take this. I agree with Mr. Hidalgo. I think a board member is entitled to bring a motion anytime, whether it succeeds or not is up to majority, of course. This issue here that we're discussing, it does have layers. There, as Mrs. Khan indicated, there's the administrative or the procedural element of how does somebody bring a motion, and then there's a bunch of other layers. So I would agree with Mr. Hidalgo that a motion can be brought, but shouldn't be brought to add an agenda item for that meeting. And I think that's in compliance there. The other elements is most of this is we should be talking about school business, not necessarily how board members should be behaving amongst other board members. Largely we do that in a retreat. But it's here, it's out there. I think it's transparency to the public. We've covered a lot of issues and yeah.
Mr. Hickey?
Well, as I said months ago, the easy way to stop it is when we're at these meetings, put your phone there and then you don't have to worry about it. And no offense like to Mr. Tate, but I mean, even all night tonight, Ed, I'm sitting next to you and you're on your computer doing Council Rock related business. I understand we all have jobs, we all have things we have to do, but this is what we sign up for, to dedicate ourselves to the kids of the district and not whatever else we're doing it. And I'm guilty of it as well. I've been on my phone, I've made text messaging, got them. But the easiest way to stop it is to put there, and you can put some central line in there that if somebody has an emergency or something like that, they can use it and get contacted. We really don't need to be as reliant on our phones as we say we do. That being said, like, I agree. You can make your motion, and if nobody seconds it, it goes nowhere. If it gets seconded and you don't get 5, it goes nowhere. It ends there. I mean, that's rather simple. We litigated all the stuff that went on, in my opinion, with the attorney months ago. I wish things would have been said publicly to me that were said privately to me or in a bathroom, that they didn't come out in public about the way this went down. I mean, just for example, though, you want to say that you can say there was no engagement letter and 3 of you weren't on the board at the time, but there's an email that went out that said, "We're so happy to have you as our new solicitor." And it went out before the meeting. The 4 other board members, the minority, were never informed of anything at all. And like I said, I'm not going to relitigate it, but it didn't go down the way that it should, and there's always going to be some bad blood. I'm not going to try to litigate this in a board meeting again. What happens with what Ms. Horner is asking for, I'm not really even sure. So I don't know how I would vote on her motion, because I have a lot of questions as to exactly what she's looking for. Like when you talk about, like you said, we're talking about Bucks County. All right, what does that have to do with, is there something specific to Council Rock? if there is, let's get it out there and let's prove it or not prove it or whatever the case may be. But like you said, have at it and, you know, we can all vote on it from there. But, like I said, the easy way to do it is, you know, don't use our, you know, during meetings, let's concentrate on the meeting and what we're supposed to do, and maybe we can get out of here before 11 o'clock at night. But, you know, like you said, I'm not gonna relitigate this in public, I have my reservations. I wish that just publicly, you would have said things to me that were said to me privately. And it still will, it'll eat at my crawl, I'll never really be happy about it, but I know there's nothing I can do about it, because I'm in a minority and that's just the way it is, and, you know, at this point, there's nothing I can do about it, you know, except for at some point in time, if the solicitor doesn't do the job, we can put it out for RFQ again and see where it all goes.
Nikki?
Yes, thank you. Well, I thought I mostly spoke earlier, but I guess I will kind of maybe either reiterate a couple of items. I guess one of the questions I had brought up earlier was, you know, this overarching hunt for text, chat, whatever all of that is regarding deliberations happening from select board members, and that's what the email had said, and select solicitors. So I guess I need clarity on that before I move forward. I still am not quite sure on clarity of what they're looking for. If the request for a year's worth of my personal text on my personal phone is looking for truth and transparency, what does that mean? Truth and transparency from what? From providing and bringing initiatives for the district for our students, our building facilities, our educational programs. I'm not, or staff members. I'm not sure what the truth and transparency is in relation to. I think that's an overwhelming ask of either other board members. If we're also, I heard, bringing it on a third party to investigate our, you know, potentially thousands of texts amongst 9 board members, if that's who we're, you know, I guess this motion would be for, or whomever the select members are, and who is paying for this? Is our solicitor doing it? Are we paying it from tax dollars? I just don't understand what we're getting out of this and for whom. It certainly doesn't sound like to me this has anything to do with our student success, growth and achievement in school or in Council Rock. And as a couple of other board members alluded to, there was already an RTK out for extensive information. So if that didn't already provide it, this continues to then search for wider, I guess, parameters. In regards to, you know, the data and the right to privacy, I agree with, you know, the majority of all of you. You know, I signed in as a board member. I knew that there's, you know, certain rights or privacy issues that I would, you know, had to do with board matter that would be public. I fully understood that. Never did I imagine when I started this process that I would be requested or asked for a year's worth of my cell phone. And then once that is public, then that I also find that to be a safety issue for me, so that's out in the public, it's been requested, and that anyone can have this entire access of all phone numbers in my database that I've had communication with over the past year. I just, that to me, it makes me extremely uncomfortable, and for me as a safety precaution. So I guess at the end of the day, I mean, I don't fully support, and the way this motion is currently written, I can't really fully support it, not understanding what it is that, not having full clarity on it. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else?
I will clarify my motion and I will get it back out to you guys so you can see it again in writing. That's why I sent it to you in writing so you could review it. But I also want to make sure that we do get onto policy 006, and I would like to have that revisited at our next policy meeting regarding having a director's concern, especially for being informed with transparency. as well as making sure the board members are never blocked from being able to put motions in forward, as well as reviewing the meeting agenda items and what would be allowed for exceptions.
Will you please email that request? And Linda will be doing the next policy meeting, but
I'll copy you both.
we, I'm not saying no, but I will say, we really are trying to get through the policies in order, and we're starting with the 200s, and then we're going into 300s, and so on and so forth. I'm not saying we'll never make an exception, but I don't want to be like, oh, well, anybody who's ever looked at a policy and wants to change it, come to the meeting, and that'll go on next month's agenda. We have to try
I
to get.
understand that, but that's why I'm saying just it's director's concern, and that should be brought forward. And it should be that if we ever feel that we have one, it should be revisited, and we should be able to have that to come back to.
Can I ask you, do you believe that each one of us as an individual has the right to control what's on the board meeting agenda? If Bob wants to bring something up and it comes into committee and no one really wants to talk about it at the board, do you think it should still come on to the board meeting? In other words, we have nine people have their right to have 9 agenda items in addition to what the leadership puts on the agenda. Do you think that's an effective way for the board to operate?
Depends on what it is. I mean, right? I mean, it depends on what it is. I mean,
Well, I want to
Well,
talk
they're
about the kind of
directors
toilet paper that's in the bathrooms. I want that on the agenda.
Done.
Then done, you can have it. I mean,
Don't
I'm
you
saying,
believe that's
something that
that's
would be
what
discussed.
that's what the superintendent's
So-
job is, to control the agenda with leadership. We elected leadership to determine agendas.
we all have a participation in the
But-
agenda.
that's not
We all.
No, and it comes
Leadership does not set the agenda.
And it
Leadership
comes
does
through.
not, excuse me, leadership does not set the agenda.
Leadership does,
Yes,
from my
they do.
understanding.
Exactly.
Correct.
Leadership's job is to run the meeting,
Is to run the meeting.
not to set the agenda.
Nope.
Leadership's job is to run the meeting.
Yep.
Do either of our leadership people want to speak to that?
Oh my God.
I think, actually, I'm glad I have my phone because I've been getting text messages from my daughter who's home alone. So I don't want to speak anymore about this. I think I've covered everything we are to cover. I really have to go home. So,
So,
Motion.
well,
public comment.
Yeah.
okay.
Yep.
I'm sorry, public. Somehow, and now I'm like, I will email Mr. Musso, but now I'm hesitant because I don't want, to speak out of turn to Mr. Musso. But somebody needs to check with Mr. Musso about where the motion would go and so on and so forth. So Anne can do that, that's fine. I won't be upset if you contact Mr. Musso. If board leadership wants to do it, that's fine. If Dr. Sanko wants to do it, that's fine, but I'm not going to be doing it. Okay? Okay. Public comment.
Sorry, I know it's late, but I sat through it all, so I can do it. First, I just want to say, I know this
Your name and
you're doing a lot, and I know this is difficult. I sat through the last 2 meetings, they were both really long, the facilities meeting last week, and I felt like in the beginning of this meeting, there was really a lot of great work that was happening, and I thought we were having lots of great discussion and really getting somewhere, and then it took a turn, and it was so disappointing, and I was like, man, we're going backwards. So I'm hoping that we can kind of get back out of this again. But I do want to say one thing. In the PA state legislation in Title 65, and this is what you'll check in with Mr. Musso, and you have to understand this, but Section 709 on public notice for agendas, you do have to have 24-hour notice on the agenda on for any official action. That includes motions, that includes votes. That's for the public. for us to be able to come out and speak to it. It's not just about you get to make a motion and then whoever's there gets to speak. It's so that we can read it and then say, oh, they're gonna talk about something there and I might wanna come out and speak about it. So if you were at a meeting and say, oh, I'm gonna make a motion to end the football program and then get to vote on that at a meeting, people would freak out. So you have to put that up on the agenda and we get to have notice as the public to be able to come out and speak on that. So you kind of don't just get to make a motion at any given meeting. You don't. I know that maybe you've gotten away with it, and I know the turf because I was at that meeting and it was an issue and it was brought up at that meeting. And it was a problem because you were discussing facilities and so Fine Zone was on it and the turf got in there. And it was sort of snuck in there and it was an issue. But it was, you have to give notice. And that's like one of the tenets of the Sunshine Law is that the public gets to have notice so that we get to come out and speak to these things. And it literally is in here at 712.1, if you take official action and do a vote on a motion that doesn't give notice, those things become void. So you really just don't get to just throw in motions at any given time on these meetings. Now, how you get them on the agenda, you guys gotta figure that out. But just throwing a motion on there, last minute, there are small exceptions called de minimis, and you guys, that does not qualify.
Two things.
Oh, wait, I forgot to have you introduce
Name.
yourself and state your town.
Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Wendy Nowicki. I'm from Upper Makefield.
And I'm not disagreeing with you. I was just making a point. I wasn't on the board at the time when that was done.
I know.
I was at the meeting.
No, no.
So I'm not disagreeing with you that it can't be done. All I'm saying that it was done. And I said to Mr. Tate, we may have, they may have skirted the sunshine laws at that time, but it got done at that meeting it came out of nowhere. And
Correct, it did, and it was an issue, and it was a
So-
violation, and so I'm not suggesting you violate it.
Okay. Before we move on, I was just thinking that I would like to request, and we're all here, it's public. It seems to me that it would be helpful to have the solicitor at the next meeting, because if we're gonna go through all these things several times tonight, I've thought to myself, I'm not an attorney, I don't know the rules, so I would like to request that we invite a solicitor to be present at the next policy meeting who can speak to some of these issues with actual information and actual knowledge, because I don't have it. Mr. Hidalgo.
He'll be at the board meeting next week. We can determine it then if we need a solicitor at the next policy meeting. Might be hashed out at the next board meeting.
She's bringing up some things for the next policy meeting that I'm assuming are gonna be the same kind of situation. So that's why I'm trying to get ahead of it. I'm not talking about the things we spoke about tonight. I'm talking about the next policy meeting.
So I say, well, let's talk about it at the board meeting when he's there. I agree, if you wanna do that, but we'll talk about it then. Bring it up then, I would like to. I mean, you can make your motion, I like your idea, but not really.
Well, it's not a motion.
Well, your suggestion to have the solicitor here.
All right, anything else? Okay. Good night, thank you.